A powerful blow was heard on the battlefield. A stream of energy hit the monster. It began to scream in pain. The protagonist jumped on its back. The guy's face was calm. The protagonist jumped off the falling demon. Gusts of wind swirled around him. He grinned at the monster, and the plot told us that this was the 93rd level archer Ian. He held an arrow in his hand and read a message that he had killed an ogre, for which he received almost 6,000 experience. Looking to the side, the protagonist said that he would receive about 100,000 gold and take a break. Ian suddenly frowned. He stood in front of a cloud of smoke. A huge monster looked at him. The two-headed ogre began to laugh. The monster with a grin on its face began to roar. The protagonist was taken aback by this. The ogre swung its club. Ian managed to jump away from the attack. He landed on the ground and mentally noted that he survived thanks to the acceleration ability. Frowning, the protagonist read that the acceleration ability would be active for another minute, after which he said that it was bad. The ogre dealt multiple blows, trying to hit Ian, who was thinking that he needed to finish it off in 1 minute. A blue projection appeared in front of the protagonist. He stood in front of the ogre. Looking at his feet, Ian wondered if he only had one trap left, adding that he had no other choice. Watching the monster prepare to attack, the protagonist reasoned that he needed to get the timing right. If he missed by a millisecond, he would be finished. Ian saw a club flying towards him. He jumped away from the attack. Electricity enveloped the ogre, and the protagonist read a notification that a high-level stun trap had been activated. The target would be stunned for 5 seconds and would be vulnerable. Blue mana accumulated around Ian's eye as he spoke about the monster being caught. The protagonist prepared to shoot the bow, and then a message popped up saying that the skills increase critical damage, precise shot and focus had been activated. Young shot the bow and said that that was all. His face was serious. The arrow pierced the monster's body. A loud roar was heard in the surrounding area. The protagonist read that he had killed a two-headed ogre and received almost 100,000 experience. Young moved towards the corpse and said that he had looked at what items had dropped. Standing in front of the projections, the surprised protagonist read that he had received Ogre Warrior shoulder guards and Ogre Warrior shoes, and then said that the chance of getting at least one item from the Ogre Warrior set was the same as winning the lottery, and he had gotten 2 items. If he sold them, it would be at least 5 million won. Luck was on his side today. Surprised, Young asked if the rewards had run out. He looked at the reward with a smile. The protagonist looked at the Crystal of Mulan. He was shocked by what he saw. We were shown warriors of different classes and told that Kylan is the best VR game in the world, which was released half a year ago, more than 10 million active users, an incredibly popular game that completely dominates the gaming industry. Sunlight enveloped the building. Ian got out of the capsule and told us that when he bought a VR capsule for 10 million won to play Kylan, using the money that his parents gave him for school and all his savings from his part-time job, everyone told him that he was crazy. He had glasses on his head. The protagonist pulled an arrow onto the bowstring and continued his monologue about how, despite the fact that he started playing 2 months after the release of the game, he leveled up an impressive archer in just 4 months. While killing monsters, Ian told us that hunting monsters as an archer brings him about 200,000 won per hour. He has already earned several million won playing this game. The protagonist introduced the new character classes and noted that the problem was that a major update to the game had recently been announced. A new region and 3 new classes would be added. All the players in Kylan were very happy about this news. However, the blue sky surrounded the city. The guy held his hand in front of his face. Clenching his fist, he screamed that they should not care about this. In order to start playing for a new class, they need to delete their current character. They have gone too far. After which the protagonist added that they will just go hunting and collect items when the new region appears. Maybe they can earn money to pay for tuition if they are lucky. The plot tells us that this was their plan. Mulana is an item that can unlock a hidden class for NPCs. Ian introduced the Mulana crystal and noted that it is an item that can unlock a hidden class for NPCs and added that it is an incredibly valuable item. In other words, he was very lucky to get it. Holding his head, the protagonist said that the problem is that it can only be used by characters below level 10 who have not undergone class change. Disappointed, Ian said that he found it too late. If it could be sold, he would get 10 million. But this is unacceptable. He will have to delete his character if he wants to use it, but delete his character after receiving all this money. The exhausted protagonist wondered what to do. He was talking on the phone with a friend who asked if Ian was kidding and wanted to delete his level 93 archer. Frowning, Barry exclaimed that his character is one of the best in Korea. He is in the top 1,000 players and the top 100 among all archers, and then clarified whether the protagonist is ready to lose all this. Looking at the phone, Ian replied that this is a chance to open the first hidden class among new players. He can't just throw this item away. Barry said with a displeased expression that he should already know a little about the new hidden classes that were revealed and asked if he knew that there was a player with the sniper class in their guild, to which he was told that the protagonist knew this and had recently gone hunting with him. Barry asked with a serious face if the protagonist thought that this sniper was much better than his archer, to which Ian said that there was quite a big difference in their levels, so he couldn't say, but he definitely had an advantage over the archer. Holding his neck, the protagonist stated that their attack range was incredible and their attack power was very strong, but their rate of fire was quite lame. He believed that he had the hardest time fighting large crowds of mobs. Confused, Barry replied that this was true. What he wanted to say was that even if it was a hidden class, it didn't mean that it would be stronger. An angry Barry asked why the protagonist would want to lose everything and start from scratch when he could easily earn 1,000,000 a day just by hunting. Ian turned to his friend with a smile on his face. He asked Barry with a satisfied expression why he was playing this game. Barry was taken aback by this question. Pointing his finger, the protagonist said that this was the main answer. He said with a satisfied expression that playing as the new hidden class would be a lot of fun. Barry grinned and said that in that case, he wouldn't stop this idiot. They looked at each other with a smile on their faces. It was evening. We were transported to a sunny game city. The merchant was sitting on the floor. Ian's face was serious. He walked up to the man. The merchant turned his attention to the protagonist and asked what he wanted. Crossing his arms, Ian said that he was looking for a potion of rebirth. The man grinned and said that the protagonist was lucky and had come to the right place. Holding the bottle in his hands, the merchant said that he had just gotten it. Ian took the potion from him. The old man grabbed his hand. He asked with a satisfied look if the protagonist knew that once he drank it, he would lose all the power that he had received and it would never be returned. The protagonist answered with a satisfied look that that was why he was going to drink it. Looking at the moon, Yan thought that this was the most expensive rebirth potion. Sitting on a rock, the protagonist assumed that he could have better attributes if he was lucky. Inspecting the potion, he read that this was a potion brewed by ancient alchemists. After drinking it, the character would be reset, his level and all attributes would be reset. Holding the bottle in front of him, Yan reasoned that he would earn even more money with his new class. He drank the potion. He was suddenly taken aback. The plot takes us to the training center of the city of Trombone, which stood under the sunny sky. The man watched the guys who were training with dummies. The old man turned his gaze and said that it was impossible. Yang launched powerful attacks at the doll and received messages that his flexibility had increased due to training, his agility attribute had increased by 1. He had survived damage that was close to its limit, his vitality attribute had increased by 1, he had been enlightened due to long-term meditation, and had received an increase in intelligence by 1. The dumbfounded boys discussed that they did not know how many days the protagonist had been training without resting. They had never seen such a diligent student, and he was an adventurer seeking true strength. Ian concentrated the energy in the blade while thinking about the update coming tomorrow. A bright beam of energy glowed in the sky. There was a smile on the protagonist's face. He appeared in the Gam City. Ian, looking satisfied, came to the conclusion that he first needed to find the Summoners Guild. Approaching the building, the protagonist noticed that he had arrived. He opened the door and asked if there was anyone inside. Ian stood in an empty room. Holding his chin, he thought that there was no one there and it looked like he would be the first. The protagonist climbed the stairs. The protagonist arrived at the Summoner Class Change Center, where he stood in front of the Guildmaster, Kine. Looking at the man, Ian said that he wanted to change his class to a Summoner. Holding his chin, Kine replied that the path of a Summoner is not easy, not everyone is given the ability to control furious monsters. Holding the back of his head, the protagonist stated that he knew this, but he believed that this class was as strong as it was difficult to master, to which he received a positive response. Kane said with a serious expression that he thought Yang was a suitable candidate. Extending his hand, he once again clarified if the protagonist really wanted to change his class to a Summoner, to which Yang replied that he did. Looking at the crystal, the protagonist suggested that he should give it to him now and asked him to take it. Dumbfounded, Kane looked at the crystal. The joyful protagonist concluded that Kane knew that this was a crystal left by the continent's hero, Mulan, to which the man remarked that Yang was much more interesting than he thought. The joyful protagonist asked in his mind to be given the hidden class. Kane extended his hand and offered to do him a favor, to which Yang replied that he would do whatever it took. Looking at him, the man said that a blue-eyed wolf had recently appeared in the Ramad Plains. His son had recently changed his class to a summoner and said that he wanted to make the blue-eyed wolf his familiar, but Kane wanted the protagonist to capture it. Taken aback, Ian asked again. The protagonist imagined the wolf and mentally noted that it was a rare monster above level 40, and then wondered why such a strong monster was involved in a level 10 player's class change quest. Holding the scrolls in his hands, Kane noted that since he was busy with his duties there, He would not be able to go himself, and he was ashamed to say it. But his son was too weak to restrain such a monster. He would give him 5 magical binding scrolls. Ian should tire the wolf out as much as possible and bind it with these scrolls. Cain added with a serious expression that the wolf that appeared in the Ramad Plains was still young, so it should not be too strong. A projection appeared in front of Ian, saying that the goal of the quest was to capture the blue-eyed wolf because the son of the master of the Summoners Guild said that he wanted to tame it. And it was also said that it appeared in the Ramad Plains, and as a reward, he would receive the Summoner class Monster Tamer. The surprised protagonist thought that it was a hidden class. Ian looked at Cain with a satisfied expression and said that he would bring him the wolf at any cost, and the man said that he hoped that he would return with good news. Looking at the protagonist, Cain noted that if he failed, he could immediately return to get help, and Ian thought that the quest would not be lost if he failed at once. The protagonist turned around and began to leave. Moving through the deserted area, Ian thought that the monsters in the Ramad Plains were on average level 10. Even if it was a blue-eyed wolf, it should not be too strong since it was still young. He ran at a high speed and noticed that even though he was level 10, his attributes were closer to level 30 players. He should be able to do it. A projection appeared in front of Ian while he was saying that he would take a look at this stallion. He saw what this wolf looked like. Stopping, the protagonist asked if the wolf was level 20, noting that it did not matter to him since his attributes were high, but he had to fight a level 20 on 10 anyway. He picked up his bow and asked if the hidden class quests were always this hard, adding that at least he would not have to worry about being killed in one hit, which could have happened if he was level 10. Ian prepared to shoot and said that he would start. The arrow flew towards the wolf. The arrow hit the wolf's body. It began to growl from the injury. The monster ran towards the protagonist. Dumbfounded, Ian came to the conclusion that he could die. Holding his chin, the protagonist began to think. He swung his fist. The protagonist punched the wolf in the face. The frightened wolf suddenly calmed down. Flexing his fist, Ian declared that he would beat it up first. He began to beat the monster, after which a notification appeared that the monster's health must drop to a certain level before binding. The protagonist unrolled the scroll and used bind. Holding his chin, Ian asked what he should do if he was sure that the wolf would die if he hit it again. The protagonist fed the wolf and came to the conclusion that it needed to be healed a little so that it would not die. Grinning, the protagonist said that it was time to return to beating. The monster was dripping with cold sweat. The sun set behind the horizon. Ian tried to bind the wolf again. Light streams of energy bound the monster. Holding the scroll in his hands, the protagonist noted that he was finally able to bind it. Beating always works. Frowning, Ian noted that he had spent quite a lot of time and that probably many users had already changed their class to a summoner. He needed to hurry. The protagonist returned to Cain and stated that the wolf was stubborn. Picking up the scroll, Ian added that he had tamed it. The dumbfounded man asked if the protagonist had tamed the blue-eyed wolf. Frightened, Cain reasoned that the first quest of a monster tamer should have been a failure, but he had succeeded and it was incredible. Confused, Ian asked if he could now become a monster tamer, to which he received the answer that this was not so and that a monster tamer was not suitable for him. Confused, the protagonist asked again. Cain stood up from the table and asked if the protagonist wanted to follow the path of a master. Smiling, Ian read that Guildmaster Cain was amazed by his potential and wanted to guide him along the path of a master. Standing in front of the projection, the protagonist mused that he had never heard of a class change quest being so rigged, and then saw a message that if he accepted Cain's offer, he could become a taming master. Smiling, Ian mentally assumed that a taming master was a much higher level than a monster tamer. After saying that he wanted to become a master, streams of energy enveloped the protagonist and a notification about the class change and new attributes appeared. The guild building was shining brightly. Ian calmly noted that he had become a taming master. Standing in front of the screen, he mused that the first thing he should do was tame the summoned beast. He imagined the monster and declared that he would tame the blood wolf like in the trailer. The smug protagonist emphasized the fact that he should become the first in Kalen. The sunny sky enveloped the wasteland. Ian was surprised. He saw the guys standing in front of the blood wolf and said that there were already those who had transferred to a new class. It looked like they were trying to capture the monster. Standing in the crowd of people, Yan noted that he did not think that anyone would be faster than him and he would see how things were. The guys prepared to attack. Magic enveloped the monster. The man frowned and cried out that the wolf's health was almost at 0. The girl opened the scroll and tried to seal the wolf. A blue magic circle appeared under the monster. He jumped out from under the seal. The monster ran away from the people. Watching what was happening, Yan reasoned that it must be a thorn to meet a blood wolf after he missed him. It's good that he managed to watch them. Apparently, capturing a high-ranking monster is really difficult. The protagonist thoughtfully noted that it would take a long time to find wolves and that it would be better to catch any monster he came across first. He stood near a cliff. Keeping his hand on his hip, Ian emphasized that he was also curious about how many wolves he could capture with his leadership stat. He noticed a pack of wolves. The protagonist took his hand and noted that he would start. The sun was shining brightly in the sky. The protagonist sealed the monster. He said with a smile on his face that he was the first to go. He looked at the taming information and the monster's characteristics. Taken aback, Ian noticed that the monsters had personalities because he had sealed a timid wolf. He stood in front of another monster. The sun was gradually setting behind the horizon. Looking at the projection, the protagonist noted that he would look at what its personality was. He was suddenly taken aback. His next captured monster was an agile wolf. Studying the characteristics, the protagonist reasoned that this one had the same level as the other, but its attributes were noticeably higher and they were called differently. With a serious expression, Ian concluded that monsters of the same type and level could have different attributes. Looking at the pack of monsters, the protagonist declared that he would see which of these wolves had the highest attributes. Smiling, Ian remarked that he would catch them all day. Drawing an arrow onto the bowstring, he thought that he would capture the wolves that had the highest attributes. The protagonist's face was dissatisfied. He flexed his hand and received a message that he had received the title of Wolf Specialist for capturing a large number of wolves. He was taken aback by the notification that with the title of Wolf Specialist, he would be able to determine the strongest wolves without capturing them. Standing in front of the projection, Ian wondered if they could do this for all the monsters, adding that he was asking too much. Stretching out his hand, the protagonist created a magic seal. He began to analyze the monsters. The wolves' levels appeared above their heads. Ian's gaze fell on a wolf of level 11. Standing in front of him, the protagonist asked if he should catch this one. The enraged monster began to roar. He rushed at Yan. A smirk appeared on the protagonist's face. Yan beat the wolf. He began to capture the monster and said that now it knows its place. The protagonist began to examine the characteristics of the beast. He noted with a satisfied look that it was surprising, because the monster is level 11, but its attributes are higher than those of level 13 wolves, and it can also evolve. Waving his hand, Yan noted that he did not need other wolves, he needed to focus on training this one. He knelt in front of the monster and called it Lu. A smile appeared on the wolf's face. The embarrassed protagonist read that Lu's loyalty had increased by 5. They ran through the desert together while Yan said that it was time to hunt. Sunlight enveloped the tall building. Sitting at the table, Barry said that their Lotus Guild had become much weaker. When the protagonist left, he said that he was changing his class to a summoner and he was curious about his progress. He began to read the information about the summoner class. Taken aback, Barry asked what was with these headings. He pressed the keyboard and said that he would take a look. Barry introduced the warriors and read that the summoner class is very fun. But there is a very big drawback. They gain experience very slowly. The summoned creature takes some of the experience, so the level up is very slow. Confused, Barry said that this is just the beginning, so it is natural that there will be a lot of complaints, but everything looks pretty sad. Ian reset the character for this, but it seems true that the level up is very slow at first. He looked at the laptop screen. Frowning, Barry noted that it may take a long time for the protagonist to reach level 20 and join the guild. We were transported to Kylan, a wasteland surrounded by the evening sky. The protagonist prepared to shoot his bow and received a message that he had reached level 20. Young released an arrow. It hit the fox. Lu rushed at it. He approached the fox. He opened his mouth and began to roar loudly. Lu began to bite into the fox's back. The fox pushed him away. Lu's face was fearless. They continued to squabble. Smiling, the protagonist said that his level and attributes were lower than the red fox, but he would attack without any fear, and then asked if it was because of his personality. Yang prepared to shoot and said that Lu was doing well. Lu was furious. He knocked down the fox that was hit by the arrow. Standing over its corpse, Yang received a message that he had slain the monster and received almost 300 experience. Frowning, the protagonist came to the conclusion that their experience was divided equally and he needed to level Lu up to at least level 15. He began to train the wolf. Yan threw him a stick. The protagonist wrapped him in bandages. A blue aura enveloped Lu, after which Yan read that he had reached level 15. He walked up to him and shouted that he was ready. Looking at the satisfied wolf, the protagonist reasoned that they were leveling up slower than he thought, probably because the experience was divided equally, but it was a lot of fun to train with Lu. He hugged Lu and noted that the wolf was getting much stronger with each level up. Looking at the screen, the protagonist suggested going bear hunting. He stood next to Lu and said that they could now move on to the next hunting location. Yan watched the bears. The angry monster began to growl. A screen appeared in front of the protagonist, saying that due to the improvement of the mastery, the initial summon was raised to the 2nd level. He received 3 skill points and learned the active ability Blessing of the Berserker Warrior, and learned the passive ability Novice Tactics, after which Ian noted that they did not grind in vain, and now he will see what these abilities are. The protagonist read on the message that the Blessing of the Berserker Warrior casts the Blessing of the Berserker Warrior on him and his comrades for 20 minutes, increasing the attack power by 30%. Using it on a pet will increase the attack boost by 100%. Holding his chin, the protagonist said that this is not bad. He read that novice tactics increases the attribute's leadership and taming by 10%. Smiling, Ian suggested that he could capture the bear. Standing above the bears, the protagonist said that he will try to catch them and he wonders if there is anyone stronger than Lu. The blue aura from the capture ability bound the monster. Looking at the projection, Ian declared that it worked, his leadership had increased significantly thanks to the newbie tactics, and now he would compare attributes with Lu. The protagonist began to compare the characteristics of the beasts. Ian saw that Lu was much stronger and asked if he was really a wolf. The confused protagonist wondered when Lu would evolve. Touching the wolf, Ian said that it was time to farm. He and the wolf rushed into battle. Pointing his finger, the protagonist ordered Lu to attract this bear. The wolf began to run around the monster. He bit the bear on the head. A massacre began between the beasts. Lu ran around the bear, dealing multiple attacks. The wolf dodged the attack with a satisfied look. Holding a bow in his hands, the protagonist reasoned that this newbie tactics is really good. Lu perfectly understands what he needs from him. The wolf dealt a crushing attack. They stood over the monster's corpse. A happy Ian read that Lu had leveled up to 19. Closing his eyes, the wolf began to howl. The protagonist stroked him and asked him to continue growing, because soon he would have no equal. Taken aback, Yan thought that they were leveling up too slowly. He would need to take quests when he reached level 20. He began to exit the game and said that that was all for today. The life of a gamer requires careful planning. The night sky enveloped the building. Wiping his head with a towel, the protagonist noted that he needed to check the forum before going to bed. He assumed with a satisfied look that some losers were complaining right now. The protagonist sat down at the computer. He started a lot of negative comments about how leveling up takes too much time and stated that leveling up for the summoner is slow. It's true, but there is too much whining. Raising his hand to his chin, Ian asked if there were any reviews from people above level 15, noting that in order for a summoner's skills to improve, he needed to reach at least that level. He was surprised that there were no such players and noted that he was level 20. There should be many players above level 15, but there were none. He introduced the sorcerer and noted that there was a level 13 player he wanted to check. Ian noticed the possession ability of the player and read that the summoner absorbs the soul of his pet. 30% of the creature's attributes are transferred to the summoner. The absorbed creature cannot be summoned in battle. Frowning, the protagonist said that he did not have this ability. Looking at the player's avatar, Ian reasoned that this ability of the Horog, one could say that this is the bread of the summoner, and since the experience is not divided, the leveling goes much faster, after which he asked why absorb a pet that can fight on its own, because the attributes are not completely transferred. Holding his head, the protagonist added that even the level of the summoned beast does not increase. This is the most interesting thing in the game for the summoner. He does not have this ability, but he does not really want it. The protagonist was suddenly surprised, after which he asked if the summoner's abilities are different from his. Sitting on a chair, Yan noted that in this case, he has an ability that ordinary summoners do not have. The protagonist drank water and remembered that there is a beginner's training. Looking at the monitor, Yan said that he did not have much information, but to sum it up, he imagined throwing a stick to a wolf and asked if it was easier for him to pump up his pet if the taming master has fewer combat abilities than an ordinary summoner. Smiling, the protagonist added that he was moving in the right direction. Standing up from the table, Yan said that he should try to capture a rare or unique chair monster. The night sky enveloped the building. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. The protagonist climbed into the virtual reality capsule. He began to immerse himself in the game and noted that he would pump Lu to level 20 before the sun rose. Yan appeared in the forest. Standing next to the wolf, he declared that he would do it. The protagonist took the bow in his hands and activated the skills. They were preparing to attack the bear. The shot hit the bear. Lu pounced on him. He began to bite into the monster's neck. Lu walked away from the bear, and Yan read that they had received more than 500 exp. The surprised protagonist cried out that he could not hunt there for an archer until he reached level 35. His farming speed is much higher than them. They killed bears one after another. Yan and the wolf ran into battle. He was suddenly taken aback. Standing by the cliff, the protagonist noticed a huge beast and noted that it looked bigger than the others. A blue sight appeared near its eye. Looking at the beast, Yang read that it was a jet black moon bear, after which he cried out that it was a unique monster and that was great. Sitting on his knee, the protagonist wondered if he could capture it. He read with a dissatisfied look that his leadership was too low to capture this creature, after which he stated that he had released the previous bear, but his leadership was still not enough. He jumped off the cliff. Yang rushed into battle and said that when he got to the city, he would need to buy more magical binding scrolls. The protagonist fired his bow. The arrow pierced the bear's chest. Enraged, Lu began to roar. The bear rushed at him. Yang thought with a smile on his face that now that he was almost as good as him, level 38 monsters were no problem at all. The wolf dodged the monster's devastating attack. Its eyes glowed with a dim blue light. Lu grabbed the bear's neck. The satisfied protagonist read that they had defeated the bear and gained over 1,000 experience points, and Lu had now been promoted to level 20. Standing in front of Lu, Yan stated that the full capabilities of Kylan were only unlocked after reaching level 20, guild registration, dungeons, imperial quests, and so on, all required level 20. Looking at the projection, the protagonist remarked that he would look at what items he had received. He saw that he had received moon bear meat, bear hunter's warhammer, and a jet black necklace. Examining the items, Yan stated that he had never seen such an item before. He noted with satisfaction that he was using an identification scroll and asked for an appraisal of his necklace. A pink aura enveloped the pendant. A message popped up about the item, that the coal black necklace is a necklace of unknown origin, made of obsidian, as black as the depths, looks insanely expensive. The joyful protagonist shouted that he had a good necklace from the auction, but this is much better, his first good loot since the reset. Ian held the book in his hands and said that his items are not bad. He will look at how much Lu's attributes have increased. Attack has increased by 4, defense by 2. Frowning, the protagonist wondered if monsters become significantly stronger with increasing level, adding that this is not the case and something does not add up. He looked at the book and thought that there is no pattern in the growth rate, and the developers could not make it random. Sitting on the ground, Ian came to the conclusion that he needs to find out how this works. He was suddenly taken aback and realized that it depends on the potential. The protagonist looked at Lu and noted that the secret is in the attribute of potential. Training increases the potential of the wolf. Frowning, the protagonist exclaimed that every time the potential increased by 10, the growth rate of the attributes increased. He knew it, the beginner training was too strong. Looking at Lu, the protagonist pointed out that the hidden class had unique abilities, after which he stated that each monster had a potential attribute and it determined the growth rate of their attributes when they leveled up. Looking at the wolf card, Yan added that in other words, the monster class itself was raised by the potential and the ability beginner training raised it. The protagonist seriously noted that he would spend all his skill points on training. He began to study the average training, where it was said that the selected summoned creature receives the status of training for 15 minutes. A pet with the status of training improves its understanding of the owner's commands. The potential of the pet will increase with repeated training. With the increase in potential, the ability average training will increase, after which Yan said that he did not think to spend skill points on capturing the bear and he is glad about it. Sitting on his knee, the protagonist emphasized the fact that he is glad that he solved this riddle. Lu's potential should soon become 100. Looking at the time, Yan said that he spent almost an hour. He stroked Lu and said that he needs to gain experience faster. The protagonist took a sandwich and noted that if he were as diligent in his studies, he would probably already be a doctor or a lawyer. Looking at the monitor, the protagonist noted that there is no point in thinking about it now. Taken aback, Yan screamed about the video of the Dark Sorcerer. He looked at the old man, whose army consisted of skeletons. Someone called the protagonist. He took the phone in his hand and added that it was an unknown number. Bringing the phone to his ear, Ian heard someone ask him if it was him and then answered yes. The phone told him that it was a teacher's assistant in the virtual reality department of a Korean university. The confused protagonist greeted her. Frightened, Ian heard that the head professor of his department was asking him to call him back because of his grades. Holding his head, the tearful protagonist wondered if he was being expelled. The protagonist looked at the balcony and asked what would happen if he did not call the professor. Ian held the phone to his ear and listened to him say that he would send the grades to his home. And of course, they were not talking about his place of residence. The guy looked ahead in confusion, thinking that his father should not see his grades. Imagining an evil Darth Vader, he decided that he would be forced to return home at the height of his youth. Ian worriedly put his hand to his forehead and said that he would call him. The guy closed his eyes and said that he should call him, but where was his number? Looking at the phone, he said that he heard him looking for it. The protagonist held the phone in fear and listened that he was definitely a new student. Ian listened in fear as the professor asked if he was okay, why he was not involved in the life of the faculty at all, how he managed to find himself on the verge of expulsion at the end of the first semester. The guy looked at the window and asked if it was because of 3 failing grades in a row. He should only have 2. Dave sat at the table with a smirk and said on the phone that it was true, but now he was thinking about giving him a 3rd. The protagonist squirmed in rage and thought that he was threatening him and why he was doing this. Smirking, he asked what he needed to do. The professor held the phone to his ear and said that first, he needed to come up with an excuse for not participating in the life of the faculty. Yang looked down in alarm, wondering if he could say it was all because of the game. How should he answer him? The guy smirked and said that, you see, the reason he chose the VR faculty was because he admired the unlimited potential of VR. One of the reasons for the popularity of VR was the game Kylan. The protagonist remembered how he pulled the bow and said that that's why he decided to study VR from the inside. He didn't just play. Putting his hand to his temple, the man listened as he studied the incredibly detailed virtual world available in Kylan. Yang frowned when he heard the professor ask about his level. If he worked so hard, he should have gotten into the ranking of the best players in Korea. The guy imagined himself in the game and said that he was originally level 93. But because he had recently reset his character, he was now level 20. Sitting at the computer, he listened as Dave asked him if he thought he was stupid, if he thought that because he said it with confidence he could avoid problems. The guy mentally noted that he was trying to avoid problems. Frowning, Ian challenged him to a bet to prove whether he was lying or not. The professor held the phone to his ear and told him to continue. He sat at the table and asked if he was really going to try to reach level 93 before the next semester. The protagonist gritted his teeth and asked if he could reach level 93 before the semester started, wouldn't that prove he had it? Smiling, the man replied that of course he sometimes plays Killin himself. If he succeeds, he will solve his problems with his studies, but if he fails, he will not only retake the exam, but Dave will also talk to his parents about his future. Ian looked away in alarm, hearing that he should participate in the life of the faculty. The man held the phone to his ear and said that if the guy wins the bet, he will give him a pass in his subjects regardless of attendance. The protagonist happily looked ahead and clarified whether he would keep his word. He clenched his fist with a smile and said that he will try his best. The guy climbed into the virtual reality capsule. Ian stood in the stream next to the wolf. He looked at Lou and called him. Stroking the wolf, the protagonist said that they will have to work hard. The protagonist raised his head and said that he was planning to get his previous level back before the end of the semester anyway. And since he avoided retakes, he would be able to do it, and he would also get credits without attending. He would definitely do it. Ian stood in front of the building and said that it was time to start. He walked up to the man at the counter and said that he wanted to join the guild. The guy smiled and said that he wanted to join the Lotus Guild. The man raised an eyebrow and said that the desired level to join the Lotus Guild was 60. He could place his request to join, but he was not sure if they would consider it. Did he really want to continue? The protagonist smiled and thought that the guild leader was his best friend and he was close with all the main members, so it did not matter. The man looked at him with a smile and said that he placed his request to join. He would be automatically registered when the guild master accepted. The guy looked at the screen and asked if he should message Barry so that he would accept the request. Putting his hand to his lip, Ian said that he was offline. Well, not that he was in a hurry, he would accept it anyway. The protagonist dissolved into space and thought that he needed to go to the auction house next. He needed to buy equipment. He looked at the glowing building and said that this was the advantage of being a successful beginner. He would change all the equipment for the best items he could find. The guy crossed his arms in the room and said that the bonus attributes of the summoner class did not add to his combat attributes, but to the attributes that help with summoning, such as taming. Sooner or later, pets will become his main power. He looked at the weapon and asked if there was something here that would improve the attributes of his pet, for example, an item enchanted with strengthening. Ian looked ahead in surprise. A window popped up with information about the bandage of Mother Nature. The protagonist tapped the screen and said he would definitely take it. Looking at the bandage in front of him, he said that summoner items were finally on sale. Maybe there were more Mother Nature items for summoners. The guy looked at the screen with a smile and said he would look for Mother Nature. He was surprised and cried out that there were more. The system showed Mother Nature's staff, which gives improvements to pets. Putting his hand to his chin, Ian said that this was a dilemma. He uses a bow. The protagonist stretched out his hand to the item, saying that he would buy it. He can't use a bow forever. He raised his hands in front of the weapon on the screen and said that it was still quite early, but it would be nice to get used to a different fighting style. The guy stood with the staff in his hands and thought about how strange it felt to hold it. Summoning a wolf, Ian said that the average training works even in cities, so it is better to use it on cooldown. Smiling, he said that it was time for quests. We see a street in the city where a stranger was shouting that this guy is a summoner. Girls were standing in the crowd near the protagonist and said that his pet is a pathetic wolf. It probably has a low level. The protagonist looked down and thought about the fact that he would take on a quest to clear the goblin camp. During this quest, the experience for goblins is double. He will receive all the experience won. Looking at the man, he said that he was an NPC for the quest. The guy approached him with his hand raised and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. Ian stood in front of him with a smile, asking how things were, and thought that it seemed like the character's attitude towards him had not reset. Frowning, John said that he was just about to say that they had some problems because of the goblin camp. Their cleanup team did not cope with them. It seems he knows a good mercenary who can help. The protagonist smiled and replied that he would personally take care of this. He happily opened the screen. The system announced that the quest clearing the goblin camp in Summer Canyon was starting. The guy smiled and thought that it seemed like he remembered correctly. Ian frowned and said that it was a group quest. Who should he invite? It was unlikely that there were newbies below level 40 in the guild. The guy asked if it was possible to postpone the cleanup until he found a group. John raised a finger and said that of course he could do it for him, and asked if he could take care of the Goblin Scouts. A message popped up saying that it was necessary to kill the Goblin Scouts in Summer Canyon. Turning away, the guy said that he would do it and thought that the road there and back would take 30 minutes. It was a little annoying, but okay. Ian crossed his arms in front of the screen and said that Barry was online. The protagonist was writing to a friend to accept his request to join the guild and he would catch up with him soon. Standing in front of the screen, the guy asked in messages if there was anyone in the guild around level 40. He pressed the screen and thought about what he would ask in the guild chat, because it was better to find an assistant from the guild than someone random. The main character wrote in the chat that he came back and said that it was only level 20, nothing special, he would soon return to his original level. He asked in the conversation if the guys knew anyone around level 40. Ian looked displeased at Barry's message asking why he was looking for level 40. Putting his hand to his chin, the guy wondered if everyone would be shocked if he told them about the quest with the goblins at level 20. The protagonist said in the chat that he plans to do the quest clearing the goblin camp, but it's a group quest, he needs one person. Someone who can stand up for themselves in the goblin camp, although, not even that, anyone who wants to go with him to the camp, he can handle it alone. Looking at the screen, the guy answered that he is level 20, but he has a very strong pet, so he thinks he can complete the quest, or rather, it will do everything for him. He read with a grin that the guys wrote that luck is on his side. This explains how he got to level 20. Ian turned away and Carl wrote that he has a friend of about level 45. The thing is that she has a production class, so her combat abilities are small. The guy said in the chat that her combat class is a priestess and the production class is like a cook. Although she is a priestess, she is unlikely to be useful in battle. She is not very good at the game. The protagonist was typing messages with displeasure and thought that he just needed someone to start the quest. He didn't care what skills he had. Ian wrote that he had things to do, so he would leave the chat, let Carl text him when he got in touch with her, and thought that he liked texting guild members, but not as much as grinding. Clenching his fist, he decided that he needed to finish the previous quest before Carl texted him. We see clouds in the blue sky. The protagonist looked at the waterfall. The guy was watching the leopards from behind a tree. Looking at the beast, he decided that it was a level 30 monster, a Karkan. Ian stood next to Lou with displeasure and thought that it would be nice to get hold of the Karkan. This ball of fur was a little lacking in coolness. The wolf stepped on the ground. The protagonist turned around in surprise. Frowning, he wondered if he could hear his thoughts. The boy extended his hand to his companion and asked if he knew how dear he was to him. Lou closed his eyes in displeasure. Yang looked at him in confusion and thought that he was truly upset. The wolf quickly spun around in front of him. The protagonist looked at the glow in fear, wondering what was going on. He frowned and realized what was going on. Lou was surrounded by many lightning bolts and the system said that this was evolution. The protagonist smiled and thought that he was finally evolving. Yang stood in front of the glow and wondered why he was evolving now. What was the requirement for evolution anyway? Smiling, he thought that his potential had reached 100, his appearance would change if he evolved. The boy stood in front of the wolf and thought that it would be great if it became bigger so that he could ride it. There was a flash in the middle of the forest. Lou stood on the ground menacingly. The protagonist looked at him happily. The wolf walked forward and the system reported that it had evolved into a wolf with a blood-red mane. A window popped up informing him that his skill level had been increased as a result of pet evolution. Raising his hands in front of his companion, the boy laughed. The wolf happily approached his master. Ian stroked Lou with a smile and said that he loved him. The system showed the wolf's characteristics. The protagonist happily looked at the screen and thought that the rank had changed from common to rare and that he could still evolve. Would his rank change to unique if he evolved again? The guy stood in front of the screen laughing and thinking that this class was definitely some kind of abnormal. He happily stroked the wolf and said that he would not choose a Korkan even if there were 1,000,000 of them. He would only choose him. Touching Lou, Ian asked if he could carry him on his back. The companion sank to the ground. The protagonist saddled the wolf. Looking down, he asked Lou with a smile to go ahead. The guy happily jumped on the beast. The wolf quickly ran through the forest. The plot moves us to the Summer Canyon on the trail. The protagonist sat on the wolf discontentedly and said that it was somehow gloomy there. He turned away and said that he didn't understand why Kylan was so realistic. Young stroked Lou's face and asked if he was supposed to deal with 10 goblin scouts on his mission. The guy held out his hand with a spell and said that now that the wolf had become so cool, they couldn't stop there, it was time to have fun. A vortex surrounded Lou and the system reported that the guy had activated the Blessing of the Wind and the Berserker Warrior. The protagonist stood in front of the goblins and told Lou that he should attack the 3 goblins first, and he would follow behind him. The guy watched the monsters in the canyon and thought that with all the buffs, the wolf's attributes couldn't be less than some pathetic goblins. Looking at the running beast, Young thought that its combat artificial intelligence should be incomparable to ordinary monsters. The guy smirked, thinking that he also now had 2 unique abilities. Lu ran forward quickly and the system reported that vulnerability detection was activated. The wolf growled furiously. The frightened goblins looked at him and said that it was a bloody wolf. The pet bit the monster's head. Lu cut off the goblin's head and the game reported that he died of bleeding. The protagonist looked forward furiously and wondered how it happened that a level 40 monster died with 1 blow. The wolf raised its head menacingly. The goblin with a club screamed angrily. Yan looked forward in surprise. The monsters were beating up the screaming Lu. The pet suddenly turned around. It dealt a powerful blow to the enemy. The guy clenched his fist and said that it was great. The wolf was beating up the enemies furiously. The goblin looked at its ally in surprise. He was sweating profusely in fear. Lu closed his mouth angrily. He ran past the enemy and the system reported that a critical hit had been made. Ian looked at the pet in shock and called for it. He approached the wolf and thanked him for his efforts. The guy hugged his friend with a smile. The protagonist stood next to the beast and said that it was time for the second round. The guys were standing in the forest in front of the monsters. Ian lay down on a rock in front of the fighting pet. He looked in surprise at Carl's message offering to talk. The guy waved to the wolf and said that this was enough, let him come to him. The protagonist read the messages with a smile that his girlfriend had written to Carl in the game and agreed. He looked at his friend's message with a smirk and asked who he thought he was. The protagonist wrote messages in the chat about how he had just cleared Somber Canyon on his own, killed all the goblin scouts in the outer camps, and raised 5 levels in half a day. Ian smiled and thought about reaching level 100 in 2 months. Putting the staff on his shoulder, he thought that he would reach level 50 in 15 days and 80 in the next 15 days. In the remaining month he would level up to level 100 and win the bet. The guy looked at the screen with displeasure and thought that this bet would help him a lot because her name was Rena. He asked the girl in the chat if she was Carl's friend. The protagonist looked at the canyon and wrote to her that since she was in the city of Lucan, she should stay in the forge. He would be there in 10 minutes. The plot moves us to the city to the houses. Ian stood on the street and asked if there was a forge somewhere around here. He turned around with a smile. The guy looked ahead with interest and sighed. The protagonist approached Rena and said that she had been told about him. Smiling, the girl said that she had heard a lot about him from Carl. She put her finger to her lips and said that they were not exactly friends, but close comrades. Ian happily stood in front of Rena and said that he was also ready, asked if she had any special reason to do this quest with the goblin camp. The girl said that there was a quest that she wanted to do, but in order to take it, she needed to complete the quest with the camp. This was a quest from the castle's cook, Duke Trappin, but she needed to complete this quest to enter the castle. The protagonist looked at her in confusion and asked why she needed a quest from a cook. Rena smiled sheepishly and replied that her artisan class was a cook. Standing at the forge, Ian admitted that he had heard from Carl that Rena had a cook class. The girl turned her head to him, agreed and explained that in fact she was also a cook in real life, to which the guy said that he had heard that this was not the easiest class, but he thought that it should be a little easier for Rena since she does this outside the game. The protagonist put his hand to his chin, and after the cook noted that it was also more fun, he thought that in the end, real skills affect how good a person is at game classes. They walked on together, and Ian said that she was the first cook he had met anyway. The protagonist smiled and asked her to cook him something delicious next time. Rena smiled back and agreed. John turned his attention to them and realized that the protagonist had found a member of the party. He held up 2 fingers and noted that 2 people might not be enough, but decided to trust the guy's choice since he knew his strength. John stood in front of Ian and Rena and told them that the main group had just left, so the 2 of them could catch up if they hurried, and recommended that they work together. A window appeared with the E difficulty quest Sumer Canyon Goblin Camp Subjugation, the gist of which was that Raphael, the leader of the vigilantes of the city of Lucan, asked a group of at least 2 people to join the enslavement team and help in clearing the goblin camp, and the reward was promised gold, which was calculated proportionally to the contribution to the clearing and double experience for killing goblins while the quest was ongoing. Ian sighed tiredly and noticed that the description of the mission had changed slightly, and assumed that it was because he was late, but the fact that the rewards remained the same made him happy. In front of Rena, there was also a system window, and when asked if she received the quest, she answered that she did. The guy waved his hand at her and decided to go straight on his way. The girl was scared when she saw Lu appear. The protagonist touched him and urged the cook not to worry, because he was his pet, not a monster, and she was surprised, but Ian did not understand what was wrong. Rena smiled and wondered if the protagonist was a summoner and asked if he had already taken on such a difficult quest when it had only been a couple of days since the new classes were introduced. The protagonist put his hand on his hip and nervously replied that he was just a little lucky because this wolf was not quite ordinary and he could level up quickly with it, and this pet was strong enough to deal with a group of goblins, and then thought that this was just a terrible excuse, but decided that Rena would not believe him if he said he was only level 25. The cook put her hand on her cheek and admitted that she envied Ian because she was level 45 but still ran away when she encountered goblin scouts. The guy was shocked that she believed her so easily, after which he thought that it probably had something to do with her skills as a craftsman, because the cook class is not 100% studied and there are many variables, and he thought that there is no point in caring about goblin scouts at level 45 if she is a craftsman. The girl waved her hand, thanked him for the kind words and said that she still preferred to cook than fight, so it was fine with her, after which she changed the topic to the wolf, which, in her opinion, looked cool. Besides, she had never seen anything like it. The guy pointed somewhere with his finger, laughed and noted that at the moment there was only one on the server. Rena adjusted her hat and asked if it had a name. She greeted Lou with a smile, finding the name cute when Ian told her his pet's name. The cook turned to the side and asked if Lou would like some treats, and the protagonist confirmed that he probably liked to eat. The girl took out a piece of meat. The protagonist, seeing and smelling the smoked steak, wanted it too. The wolf bit into the dish and after eating it, his vitality increased by 200 units for 20 minutes. A system window appeared in front of Ian, and Rena asked what was wrong. The guy leaned towards the window and asked if Lou's stats had increased due to the effect of her cooking. The protagonist turned to the girl in shock after she explained that when cooking skills reached an advanced level, the food cooked gave a buff depending on its type. He thoughtfully read the dialogue box and noticed that with Lou's HP just under 14,000, a bonus of 200 was significant, and so decided to befriend the cook. The guy then got angry at the wolf for eating everything by himself. Ian scratched the back of his head and asked if there was anything for him, but the girl replied that she didn't have anything right now. He was very upset, and the girl said that she would make him something after the quest and asked her not to be jealous. The protagonist loomed over her and declared that it was a promise. The group gathered in Summer Canyon. The knight knelt down on one knee and informed the leader of the enslavement, Hugo, that hired reinforcements had arrived. The man saw Ian and his companion and noted that they were just in time. He leaned forward and thanked them seriously for coming. The boy accepted the thanks just as confidently and thought it was great that they weren't late. He looked around and realized that the other players seemed upset for some reason. He and Rena had walked forward after the protagonist decided it didn't matter since they would be fighting separately. Dust rose up on the field. One of the red-eyed goblins screamed. Hugo pointed at them and exclaimed that they would exterminate the monsters of Summer Canyon, then ordered all units to attack. The goblins attacked, and the humans readied their blades. Rena was worried, so she checked with Ian if this was really okay. The boy turned to her and repeated that everything would be fine, and instructed her to just do as he told her. But the cook was unsure since he was supposed to be the only fighter on the cleanup team's side. The protagonist placed his hand on his belt and noticed that the girl would actually be useful as well, as her shield attack dealt quite a bit of damage, remembering that due to Rena's fear. Her shield skills were very well developed. He looked ahead and came up with a simple plan where the girl would tank the damage and he would deal it, deciding that her level was relatively high in the goblin camp. The guy's eyes sparkled and he also thought that Rena's mastery of the Shield of Brightness was comparable to a level 60 skill, meaning that she was not afraid of death. Ian glanced at the cook and considered that as soon as she attracted more goblins, he and Lou would take all the experience, and since she was here with him, the guy decided that he could make the best use of her because she was essentially a meat shield. The girl smiled at the protagonist and said that she trusted him. The protagonist approached Lou and advised him to trust the wolf instead of him, after which he thought that with this plan, Rena would also gain a lot of experience if she didn't die. But the probability of her dying was 0. He frowned and tried to convince himself that it wasn't because of the cook's incredibly delicious cooking. The goblin jumped on them. The girl surrounded herself with a shield. The monsters began to attack the barrier, and when he asked how much longer she could hold out, Rena told Ian that he shouldn't worry and said 10 minutes. The protagonist smirked and noted that the cook was better than he thought, and assumed that he was too worried about someone level 40 because she was fine. Lou rushed into the crowd of goblins, gaining experience for killing them, despite the fact that they are much stronger than the goblin scouts, and even considering that the experience is divided between the 3 of them, Ian decided that he had too much of it. The protagonist was shown 2 messages about leveling up to 26, then 27. He smiled greedily and remarked that it was amazing. Bare steep cliffs. A guy saw the protagonist beating up goblins and wondered who he was. He was nervous and surprised because the protagonist looked like a summoner but was already high enough level to be here. Edward touched his head and motioned for Luke and Greta to come and look at this, and his friend asked what was going on. The guy pointed to the ongoing battle and clarified what they thought about it. Greta closed her eye and said that it was a summoner, but Luke realized that was not the problem and remarked that to hunt here, the protagonist had to be at least level 40, but his wolf's combat abilities looked like level 60. Edward raised a finger and added that the summoner class was released not long ago, so he did not believe in level 40 and thought that the protagonist was level 20 at most, and the girl agreed with him. Luke frowned and remembered reading on the forums that the verified top 1 player had reached level 17 or 18. Lu threw a few more monsters, and their group wondered what kind of wolf the protagonist was using. Luke assumed a thoughtful pose and suggested that it could be an artifact with summoning magic. Edward snapped his fingers and said that he had an idea about that. He smirked and explained that looking at the fight between Ian and Rena, one could conclude that they were newbies. Plus, he thought the protagonist did not have offensive spells since he used his staff in hand-to-hand combat. His comrades tensed up and Greta suggested that Edward was suggesting that they become player killers. Luke extended his hand towards her and nervously asked her not to be so loud, and she apologized. The girl folded her hands on her stomach and asked the party leader if he was being too rash, and thought that it was not worth it if they did not get good equipment after killing them, since the penalty for killing a player was quite severe and it would not be easy to restore the lost reputation. Edward raised his fist and urged them to think about it again, and calculated that one magic summoning artifact would bring them at least 20 million gold, which was 6-7 million for each of them. Luke stepped forward and exclaimed that this amount of gold exceeded 40 million won. The party leader put his palm forward, noted that this was true, and thought that if they did not do it now, they would not have to worry about their equipment until at least level 80, and then asked the guys if they really wanted to miss this opportunity. He raised his finger and added that he also had a brilliant plan. Lou growled, beating up a few goblins along the way. Ian opened the system window and found out that he would soon reach level 30, and wondered what 2 class skills he would get, considering that players gain them every 30 levels. He clicked on something on the screen and read that the forum said that these abilities were 100% random, but in fact, he knew that this was not true and one of them would be related to the most advanced skill. The protagonist looked closer at the skill tree and added that the second ability would definitely be random. He smiled and already decided which ability would be best for him. The dialog box gave a description of the active skill of level 3 medium training, which imposes a temporary status training on one of the pets, during which the animal better understands the orders of its owner and has several additional buffs. The goblin missed when he tried to hit the protagonist, who at that time noticed that this skill increases potential and assumed that he would get one ability related to it. Ian hit the monster on the head and hoped that this random skill would not give him anything related to farming. Rena, who was holding a shield, warned the protagonist that she had 5% of holy power left. The guy swung his staff and shouted to the wolf to help the girl and protect her. Lou immediately rushed to the cook. He instantly appeared in front of Rena and dealt a critical hit to the goblin scout, instantly killing him and the goblin warrior and bringing the owner quite a lot of experience. The girl stroked the wolf and thanked him. The protagonist began to get annoyed, seeing how this ball of fur got along with Rena, and was upset that Lou was not so nice to him. He shed a tear and decided to deal with it after completing the quest. The wolf turned his head, confused. A fierce battle was taking place in the canyon. The goblins had gathered in a camp and were panicking. One of them, with a staff, came out of the tent, indignant that humans dared to set foot on their territory. He bared his teeth and ordered to kill all the intruders. The monster raised the staff above his head. A powerful spell fell to the ground. The warriors took a direct hit, and some managed to survive, getting off with only burning armor. Hugo, watching the destruction, assumed that it was the chieftain. He tensed up and ordered all the guns to be loaded, so that the battle would end with victory over the enemy and nothing else. Ian confidently looked ahead when he received a notification that the allies' morale had increased by 30%. The warriors ran forward with enthusiastic cries, receiving a 10% stat buff for 20 minutes. The protagonist waved his staff forward and motioned for Lou to attack. The wolf easily killed several goblins. The chieftain stared at this in shock. Lou was running towards him. The goblin chief spread his arms and exclaimed that Lou was just a beast raised by humans. The next moment, the wolf dealt him a critical blow. The chieftain's shoulder exploded, and the system reported that his health had been reduced by 0.7% of his total health, and that he would take periodic bleeding damage for 10 seconds. The leader of the enslavement raised his fist and called for a joint attack, then roared. Projectiles approached the chieftain from all sides. The ground exploded. Smoke billowed out. A battered goblin emerged from the smoke, and the system warned that he had 30% of his total health left. The chieftain opened his mouth wide and screamed, and the system explained that he had received the berserker status. His tongue lolling out, he went on the attack. Yang gritted his teeth, dodging his blow. He turned his attention to what was happening in front of him. The guy slipped, and the system reported that he had been hit by a chain explosion and received a moderate amount of damage. The protagonist fell. He looked at his burning arm, noticed that it hurt and that he needed to heal. Suddenly, a blue aura enveloped him, and the system notified that a member of Rina's party cast a healing light on him and restored a lot of health. The protagonist smiled, realizing what had happened. He turned to the girl. Yang glanced at the cook and thanked her, and she responded with a silent smile. The boy summoned Lu and ordered him to attack. He moved the staff aside, and the wolf growled. The beast raised its head, and the protagonist warned the others to be careful and asked them to continue luring the chieftain towards themselves. Yang created a bow. Lu ran forward. The protagonist pulled the bowstring. He confidently looked ahead, trying to find the enemy's weak point. The goblin leader spread his arms and spread fire, calling on everyone to die, and the protagonist realized that the enemy had become much more aggressive and that there was no time to fail. The chieftain even burned one of the warriors. Lu approached the monster from behind. Yang took aim and decided that it was high time to attack. His arrow took off. It overtook the humans and flew towards the goblin chief. The boss saw a flash in the sky. He opened his mouth and roared. The arrow pierced him through. Then it stuck into the ground. The chief fell, shrouded in white flames. The beaten warriors frowned, not fully understanding what had happened and whether the enemy was dead. But then the system congratulated them on killing the goblin chief and completing the goblin camp quest. They raised their hands and weapons up, happy that they had done it and completed the quest. The protagonist looked to the right and read the messages he had received about defeating the boss, gaining a huge amount of experience, increasing fame due to making the greatest contribution, and completing the quest condition of subjugating the goblin camp. The guy looked at the windows in front of him, announcing his promotion to level 30. He saw a special red message warning about the opening of class skills, as well as the unlocking of the special skills assign a skill to summon and spatial distortion, which caught his attention. Hugo distracted Ian from his thoughts. He extended his hand to the protagonist, said his name and thanked him. They shook hands and the man said that they did not suffer serious losses thanks to the protagonist, and therefore considered himself in his debt. The guy replied that they succeeded only thanks to the bravery of Hugo's guys. The leader of the enslavement glanced over their backs and urged the guys to be careful when returning. He turned to his subordinates and loudly wished them luck. The man raised his fist and shouted that they had completed their mission and that it was time for them to go home. Ian patted Lu, sighed and was glad that it was over. He sat down on the ground and decided to take a look at the new skills. The guy read the description of the skill assign a skill to summon, which, as he expected, was related to potential. He folded his arms and thought about giving the skill assignment to Lu, and then wanted to check its potential. The protagonist put his hand to his chin and noticed that the wolf's potential was only 6, while it took about 100 to evolve. He put his hands on his hips and decided that he should give the pet an ability to increase this stat. Ian sat down on the ground again and thought that he needed to help Lu evolve as soon as possible, but he knew that it would affect his skills. He looked at the description of the second skill, Spatial Distortion, which allows you to swap places with your pet, which is desirable to activate without taking damage during use. The protagonist looked down and noticed that it was a little disappointing that he did not get an attack or slowing skill, but he figured that it would definitely come in handy in battle, so he was pleased with such cool skills. Rina raised her hand and called out to Ian. She bowed, thanked the guy and said that they won only because of him. The protagonist waved his hand and praised the cook, who, in turn, said that she could not have done it without the guy. Lu approached them, and the protagonist called for thanks to him because it was he who did the main work. The girl turned away and admitted that she was very surprised at how strong the wolf was when she saw him in action. She approached Lu and thanked him for today. Ian turned around, noticing someone approaching. Edward and his guys approached and apologized, and the protagonist wondered who they were and why they were here. The guy who came up extended his hand and said that he was glad to meet him, after which he said his name and admitted that he was too busy with the quest, so he did not have the opportunity to meet the protagonist. Ian shook his hand and introduced himself. He thought about it when Edward offered to join his group and complete a couple of quests. The guy smirked and said that they knew about a hidden quest that was a continuation of the mission to conquer the goblin camp, and the protagonist assumed that he was talking about the priest's quest. Ian frowned and thought that he hadn't planned on doing it because of its difficulty, but now his level was much higher. He looked closely at Edward, not understanding why these guys, 2 of whom were at least level 50, needed him, because there was a big difference between them. The protagonist tilted his head and pretended to be interested in the hidden part of the quest, but in fact he decided that something was wrong and that more information was needed. Edward looked Ian in the eye and explained that this was a quest to kill the goblin priest, whom they found in the tunnel behind the barracks and who only needed to be killed. But he was afraid that even though the priest was much weaker than the chieftain, the 3 of them would not be able to handle it. He put his hand forward and shared his thoughts about the protagonist having a powerful summoning artifact, and thought that if he and Rina joined them, they would definitely cope. Ian smiled slyly when he realized that the 3 thought that he was using the artifact. He smiled wider, realizing that since artifacts were very expensive, these players wanted to kill him to make a lot of money for themselves. The protagonist put his hand on his hip and stated that he understood everything and that he agreed to help the guys, thinking that it would be nice to have fun with these idiots. Columns of smoke rose above the canyon. Ian and Rena frowned and looked ahead, and then contacted in a private chat. The girl, without turning to the protagonist, asked why he was writing, and the guy warned her that she should be ready. The guy turned to the suspicious guys and noted that it sounded great, but asked them to wait while he consulted with his girlfriend. Edward smiled and said he agreed. Ian turned to Rena and asked her what she thought about what she heard. The cook silently looked at the guy who wrote in the chat that the three seemed to want to kill them, and then asked if he thought they encountered player killers. Ian looked seriously at his companion and sent a message that they were probably going to kill them after the fight with the priest, but thought that they were not really interested in Rena. The protagonist glanced at Edward, and the girl in the chat asked Ian what they should do, and immediately agreed to play along when he asked. The cook turned to Greta and the guys and said that there was no reason to refuse, because this was a secret mission, which meant that everyone would benefit. The villain gave a thumbs up and exclaimed that this was great, thinking what idiots his victims were. Ian turned his head to his friend, who asked what the plan was, after which he replied that there was no need to worry and that everything was already thought out. The guy looked ahead, his eyes sparkled, and decided that they would have a wonderful time. Edward was playing with the fire with a grin, Greta glanced at the guys, and Luke had a predatory expression on his face. The man was sitting on a high cliff. He stretched and noticed that the air in Kylan was very refreshing. The man named Dave smiled and said that this virtual world was beautiful and its creators were real geniuses. He relaxed, looking into the distance, and decided that he needed to convince his friends to go camping in this game. The man put his hand in his backpack and found food. He bit into a kimbap and admitted that there was nothing better than him on a camping trip. Dave looked up and remembered something. He created a small magic circle and summoned his pet, Wolfie. A figure of a wolf appeared next to him. The beast raised its head and howled, and its owner noted that it always did that. The man handed Wolfie a ham and offered him a snack. The wolf closed his jaws around the meat, and Dave said again that it was very nice here. The man tilted his head slightly to the side and thought. He frowned and thought that the guy was probably still playing. Dave remembered Ian, who had been nervous while talking to him on the phone. He scratched his chin and decided that he should have clarified what class he was, and hoped that the protagonist was not a summoner. A light lit up the dark cave. It went deep inside. The group entered the battle, and Rena was telling Ian which side to watch, and he was telling her when to use healing. Edward glanced behind him and thought that the quest would soon end and the priest would soon appear, which meant it was time to begin. His plan was to attack the protagonist from behind while he and his friend fought the mini-boss. He imagined himself standing on a mountain of gold after obtaining an artifact worth tens of millions of won. Ian saw Edward's stupid smile and thought he was an idiot for not even being able to hide it. He turned to Rena and warned her that the boss would appear soon, and she asked what she should do. The protagonist pointed out the prison-like cage in front of her and explained that once someone entered, a 5-second countdown would begin until the boss appeared, after which all entrances and exits would be closed. He showed Rena something on his fingers and said that once he gave the signal, she should run towards the exit. Lou rushed forward as soon as he gave the order. He opened his mouth and scared the goblins away. Ian turned to Edward and asked if he could handle it if they sped up, and Edward replied that everything was fine. The villain grinned slyly and noticed that the protagonist really had no idea about anything, and decided that it would be even easier for him. The protagonist turned his head towards him and realized that everything was going according to plan. The group approached the cage. Edward explained to Ian and Rena, who were walking behind, that a priest and 2 berserkers would appear here, and then suggested that they begin. The protagonist turned to Lou and said that he would go first. The wolf stepped into the boss area, and his master began the countdown. The guy noticed that the grate was starting to lower. Rena approached him. The protagonist took her hand, seizing the moment. He jumped back with it in his hands, and the cage lowered. The exit was closed. The leader of the group rushed to the grate and exclaimed at Ian and his friend, not understanding what they were doing and why they did not go in. The protagonist grinned and said that he was not as stupid as Edward imagined him. He pointed his finger at the conspirator and stated that he knew from the start that they wanted to rob him and take the summoning artifact. The villain sweated and hesitantly asked Ian what he was talking about, trying to figure out how he knew. The protagonist waved the 3 of them through the bars and wished them luck, adding that he no longer had a reason to play along. Edward grabbed the bars of the cage and called the protagonist a dumbass, since he and his friend would not escape from here either. He stuck out his tongue and said that the path would not open until the boss or the players were defeated, and then stated that once they easily finished off the priest, which would not take long, they would kill the 2 of them. Ian picked up his staff and thanked the group leader for confessing everything. He opened his mouth and loudly ordered Lou to devour them. The wolf immediately attacked Luke, dealing a critical hit to him for 32% of his total health. The leader of the group turned around in panic, and Greta screamed, while the system reported that Luke would receive periodic bleeding damage for 10 seconds. Edward was furious at this dog. Ian, who had been watching this with satisfaction, cancelled the summoning. Monsters with red eyes emerged from the depths of the cave. The leader of the group turned to them and cursed. Goblins emerged from the fog. The protagonist threw up his hands, and the villain insulted him and promised that as soon as they defeated the boss and got out of here, the guy would die. Ian sat down on the ground and said that he would wait. Edward clutched the bars with his hands and cursed, and the monsters behind him growled, after which the system reported that the boss had appeared. The goblins on either side of the priest were armed with axes. The leader of the group held his sword forward and gave the order to his comrades to focus on the boss and postpone killing Ian for now. He summoned a shield and told the protagonist that he would come for him soon. The protagonist smiled and noticed that even Edward's phrases were like cliched villains. Rena turned to Ian and asked if everything would be okay. The protagonist turned his head to her and offered to help her if she was worried, but the girl did not understand what he meant. Edward clashed with enemies in hand-to-hand combat. Axe clashed with axe. Greta clashed with one monster in an intense fight. The group leader received a powerful blow to the shield. He frowned and made a slashing attack on the goblin. The priest raised his staff and read something in an incomprehensible language. Luke grabbed the spear and said that he would take care of it when Edward pointed out that they needed to kill the priest before he cast the spell. The spear appeared in the air. It pierced the priest's shoulder. The villain smirked and thought that it was an item from that bag. Suddenly, he heard someone use Barbarian Warrior's Blessing. The axe-wielding monsters were enveloped in an aura, and the system explained that due to the skill activation, the attack power of the vicious berserker goblins was increased by 35%. Edward turned around and saw Rena casting a spell. The girl raised her staff with a smile and cast an additional Blessing of the Wind, which increased the agility of the enemies by another 42%, while the guy was shocked by her actions and her decision to buff the monsters. The cook turned to Ian and asked if this was enough, and he offered to heal the goblins some more. Rena waved her staff, agreeing to do so. Edward and the others panicked and loudly asked to stop. They raised the white flag and the system reported the quest has failed. At night in the city, Ian, Rena, and Lou returned from the quest. The protagonist checked the system window and noticed that they had a lot of good things for the three losers. He turned his head to the girl and said that they could go to the auction house to sell the loot. Rena became nervous, looked away, and thanked the protagonist for completing the task thanks to him, and for the large reward she received. The guy extended his hand to her and thought that she deserved it, but admitted to himself that he did not think that they would receive an expensive necklace of a goblin priest. He imagined a gold pendant with stones and was a little upset that they had to split the proceeds, but decided that everything was fine because he had other items. Ian scratched his cheek, remembering Rena's reaction to this, and although he did not expect that she would like it so much, he thought that it was worth it. The cook looked at the protagonist with bewilderment, who suggested that they hurry to the auction house. So, the three of them went on. A tall, narrow building. The shopkeeper put a bag of money on the counter. Ian happily picked it up, received a message about purchasing 660,000 gold, and noticed that they were all sold at a high price. He took a coin out of the bag and concluded that the auction house commission had already been deducted from his profit. The guy looked down and thought about something. He took out an incomprehensible stone from his pocket, the kind that a group of player killers had dropped. The protagonist tossed it in his palms, felt that it was warm, and assumed that it was intended to be used as a hot compress in the winter, and although the description of the item was useless here, he really did not want to throw it away. Rena waved at Ian and announced that she had finished buying ingredients. The guy turned to her and offered to go finish the quest, and she agreed. The light was on in the guild building. John stood in front of the two of them, admitted that he was glad to see them and that he had heard a lot about them, and Ian was flattered, after which the system congratulated him on completing the quest, in which the protagonist had contributed the most and received an SS rating, as well as 56,700 gold and almost 2 million experience, which increased his level to 34. The protagonist glanced at the report in the system window and noticed that these were incredible numbers of experience and money. Rena winked and said that she had leveled up to 46, and Ian congratulated her. The guy turned to John, remembering that he had something to tell him. He took out a necklace with a round pendant and said that he had actually met a goblin priest behind the camp. Taking a closer look at the sparkling decoration, the guildmaster was very surprised and admitted that it was truly incredible, after which the system notified the protagonist about completing the quest with a B+ grade, receiving almost 700,000 exp and raising to level 35. Ian grinned, happy about another leveling up. John smiled at him and said that the enslavement team had been tracking him for a month and asked how the two of them found him, to which the protagonist replied that he was just lucky. The man reached into his pocket and decided that this could not be simple luck. He took out a scroll and declared that Ian had the right to do this. The protagonist tensed up, seeing the glow. The scroll opened and embers flew off it. The boy read the message that appeared in front of him about receiving a recommendation for checking the mercenaries of the Lucifel Empire, which was another reward for the quest. John handed the document to Ian and explained that with it he would be able to pass the exam for a mercenary in the Empire, and advised him to go to Mulan as he saw great talent in the protagonist. The protagonist looked at the scroll in his hand, thanked the guild master and promised to definitely pass the exam, but in fact he decided to take the paper only in case he stopped by Mulan. John gave the same scroll to Rena and asked her to continue fighting evil for the sake of peace in the kingdom of Lucifel. The girl took the document and asked Ian why she needed it, and he told him what the guild master explained to him, but the cook did not know what Mulan was. The guy turned to her and explained that there were actually 5 main continents in Kylan, but only 3 were currently accessible, the one they were currently on, in Kolinar and Malacca, which had been released recently. The girl imagined a throne room when Ian added that there were 2 major empires in Kolinar, one of which was the Empire of Lucifel, and Mulan, named after the hero who founded the state, was its capital, and then said thank you for the information. The protagonist took a thoughtful pose and thought that he should have no reason to go there until level 50, and then Rena wanted to ask something else. She came closer to Ian and asked what the benefits of passing the mercenary exam were, and the guy answered that firstly, after successfully passing it, NPCs would be more willing to assign different quests, and secondly, new requests would start appearing in the mercenary guild every day. The protagonist raised a thumbs up and added that the mercenary's rank would depend on combat skills, and Rena noticed that this was quite useful. The girl turned to Ian and admitted that she was going to devote herself to cooking for some time, so she did not think she would need the scroll anytime soon. She confidently clenched her fists, thinking about the kitchen, and said that she would like to work on leveling up her skills. The protagonist smiled and concluded that cooking was a priority for Rena and thought that her culinary level was at the top of Kylan's. He remembered how the girl fed Lu meat and how much his stats improved from eating it. The guy, being in the real world and checking the forums, did not notice a single mention of this type of leveling, which once again proved that the production class was underestimated. Ian scratched the back of his head and asked his friend how well she knew about cooking, and the girl thought for a while. She gave him a thumbs up and admitted that she was an advanced level 1. The protagonist was shocked, as he knew that even for a blacksmith, the most popular artisan class, the highest level currently was advanced 3, while Rena thought that she had to work much harder to master more complex skills faster. He smirked and concluded that if this girl was at that level, she was definitely among the best players, and said that he had heard that leveling up an artisan was very difficult, and called Rena simply amazing. The girl blushed, looked away, and thanked Ian, and then hoped that he would keep his promise when he asked her to write if she needed help again. The protagonist scratched his temple, agreed, and was afraid that he had said something careless. He saw a system window with a friend request from Rena. The protagonist reached for the accept button without thinking, and the cook was grateful again. The girl's eyes sparkled and she handed Ian something. John felt awkward when she explained that she had prepared it while she was waiting for the guy. The protagonist opened the box and found an appetizing looking dish inside, which he was happy to see and thought that Rena was definitely an angel. The girl smiled sweetly and hoped that Ian would not think that she had feelings for him. The guy closed the box and, still smiling, said that he had been waiting for this for a long time, but Rena replied that it was nothing compared to what he had done for her. The girl winked and said that she was leaving since she had played enough, and they said goodbye. Ian waved at her. He clicked on the system window and found out that there were about 5 hours left until bedtime, and since he had done a lot today, he decided that he could treat himself to dinner. The guy gently took the box with both hands and thought that he might even order himself some fried chicken. Clouds floated across the sky. Yan was racing towards Lu. He gritted his teeth and urged the wolf on. The pet left furrows in the ground, but his master wanted to get there faster since they were running out of time. The protagonist was visibly nervous, since the delivery was late and he had spent more time than he expected. The sky suddenly stopped moving. Yan pointed to a ship in the harbor for Lu. The wolf raised its paw and growled approvingly when the guy said that they needed to get to that ship dock. The protagonist looked ahead tensely and remembered that he had been here before, but it was a long time ago, and this time his goal was to get to the island of the deep to summon the ice golem. They ran along the wooden scaffolding, and Yan showed Lu the direction. The ship raised its anchor, but the protagonist thought that they still needed to do this. He held on tightly to the wolf's fur. The pet ran as fast as it could, and its owner urged it not to give up and not to stop. Lu jumped. They both ended up in the air. The ship's crew was shocked by what they saw. The wolf didn't reach them. It was too far. Ian pushed off his pet's mane. It soared into the air. Then he looked at Lu and cancelled the summoning, after which he stood on the deck. The guy adjusted his cloak, sighed, and noticed that he had barely made it. The crew members looked at him with their mouths open. The protagonist turned away, and since he was embarrassed, he preferred to watch the wonderful weather. The ship moved further out to sea, and Ian thought that he would never get used to it, after which he was greeted. A mysterious figure from behind asked if he was a summoner. The protagonist turned around and saw a group of 4 people. He tensed up, confirmed and clarified who was asking. The guy who asked the question smirked in response. Ian noticed that right now it was just him and this group on the ship. The 4 of them had an evil aura about them, and one of them said that they were just curious. The protagonist summoned his weapon, assuming that they were player killers. He flinched. The guys surrounded him and started asking him to summon that cute, big, cool wolf again so they could pet it, and they were also curious about its breed, and Ian realized that he had made the wrong conclusion. The protagonist put his weapon away and remembered the way these people were looking at him. The ship was moving forward. The protagonist put his finger to his chin and asked if they were going to a desert island. The guy with long hair, Haynes, pointed at his comrades, said that they were, and told him that these 2 were sorcerers and that they had come to help with a quest to obtain cold magic. He looked Ian in the eye and asked if he was going there on a quest too, and he answered in the affirmative. The mage put her hand on his shoulder and asked him to stop being so clingy when he asked if there was a summoner quest on the island. The blonde bowed and apologized for his behavior, but Ian assured him that everything was fine, after which Haynes admitted that he was very interested in the summoner class, and that he had a friend of this class named Lauren, who was leveling up quite quickly. The guy held out his hand, holding a cube with a summoning egg in it, and explained that Lauren told him that she had recently found one, so he was wondering if Ian had heard of it. The protagonist became more serious and asked what it was. Haynes raised a finger, added that it had not hatched yet, and concluded that that was all he knew. The protagonist crossed his arms and thought about how golden rat snakes appeared in the level 20 hunting grounds, which meant that Lauren hadn't reached level 30 yet. He lowered his head, smiled slyly, and wished to see that egg, and guessed that he could get the boss egg. Ian touched his chin and decided that it sounded good, but he reminded himself that he had to be on guard. The ship cut through the waves. The water ahead was frozen. The shore was covered in ice. The protagonist and the wolf looked over the side. He looked ahead eagerly and noticed that they had already arrived at the desert island. The ship approached the land. It stopped on the shallows. The guys got out on land and immediately began to shiver, and Haynes admitted that this was his first time here, but this place seemed creepy to him. Not to mention that it was very cold, since the entire island was made of ice, and his companion agreed with him. Ian hugged himself and thought that he had been here before, but this place still impressed him. He sneezed and concluded that he should have dressed warmer. Haynes and the others waved to the protagonist and his furry friend and walked away from Ian, who wished them luck in their search. The guy put his hand on his hip and motioned for Lou to go ahead, and the pet supported him. There was a group of creatures under the hill. The protagonist walked to the edge of the ice floe. The wolf approached him, and he decided that it was a good place to hunt, filled with ice golems. They made a stop after Ian said it was time to get to work, but first they needed to prepare. The guy put his hand in the bag, looking for a snack from Rena. He pulled out something and asked Lou if he wanted to try it. The protagonist threw it into the air and the wolf obediently caught it with its teeth. The pet was covered in a strong aura, and the system explained that after he ate the meatball, his vitality increased by 100 and his agility by 20 for 40 minutes. Ian petted Lou and noticed the wolf's buff, which, as it turned out, not only increased vitality, but also lasted twice as long. He took out another ball and wondered if he should try it too. He covered his nose, feeling that it was raw meat, which smelled terrible. He remembered Rena saying that it was only for Lou, and understood why the girl said to give it to the wolf and that the treat would not suit him. The protagonist opened his box and exclaimed that this was his. He took a bite and admitted that it was very tasty. After eating it all, Ian fell on the ground and felt like he was in heaven, and the system explained that it was a tender premium steak and that the protagonist's vitality increased by 500 and defense by 30 for 1 hour. The protagonist read the notification and noticed that the effects of this food were better than meatballs, but he expected nothing less from Rena's cooking, after which the guy suddenly received a system message that he had eaten food cooked according to modern standards for the first time, due to which all his stats increased by 3. Ian frowned and opened the system window to check it. He also opened the status window to his left. The protagonist looked at his photo and the list of stats and noticed that all of them actually increased by 3, even the class ones. He tensed up and calculated that if 7 of his stats were increased by 3, then, therefore, in total he was able to get 21 points, which is equal to a 4-fold increase in level. Ian gave a thumbs up and decided that Rena was really amazing. He smiled predatory and thought that he should bring her a grill so that she could cook him something else. The guy walked forward with Lou, intending to beat these living icicles. At the fountain and trombone in the Lucifel Empire, 3 people were transported here. They were Edward and his companions, who were immediately discussed by passersby who knew that equipment and items are lost upon death, and assumed that these 3 had failed the quest. They opened their inventories and began to curse because Luke lost his very expensive lizard armor and Greta lost her Halio necklace, which increased her attack range. The leader of the group was annoyed and cried when he saw that he had nothing left because he did not have time to remove his equipment. He gritted his teeth and remembered Yan and Rena, who deceived them, and was sure that the main character was a weakling, because if only they had not fallen into his trap, everything would have been different. Veins bulged on his face and he noticed that the offenders did not know that he was in a powerful guild which is in the top 30 best. Edward pointed his finger somewhere ahead, declared that he would show the protagonist the power of their guild, and promised that Ian would be in big trouble, after which he exclaimed that he would not allow him to appear on Kaelin again. The protagonist bent over, stretching his back, and wanted to take a break since he had been farming for over 10 hours. He sat down on the ice and Lou lay down next to him. The guy offered the wolf a meatball and he immediately jumped up. The pet snatched the treat from Ian's hands. The protagonist smiled nervously, seeing how Lou ate the whole thing in one go. He held out another ball of meat in his palm, noticing that they were too small for the wolf. The pet put its paw on the guy's hand, who thought that Lou had eaten his fill and did not want any more. The wolf shook its head. The protagonist petted the pet when he realized that it wanted to share and praised it for caring, calling it a good boy, and then explained that these treats were for the wolf while there was food left for himself as well. Ian opened the system window to look at the statistics of the ice golems he had caught today. 3 windows appeared in front of him with information about the taming of Lou and 2 more level 37 stone creatures, meaning that the protagonist could catch 1 more. He looked closely at the numbers and noticed that both had better stats than normal ice golems, but he wanted something even better. The protagonist glanced at Lou and added that he at least wanted a pet with the ability to evolve. He got up from the ground and suggested that they continue, since his plan was to find something good before leaving to make up for all the time they had spent here. Another group of ice golems. Ian and the pet were hiding behind an ice floe. The guy saw something unusual. Above one of the golems, a name was written in large letters in gold. The creature rose to its full height, and the protagonist thought that he was lucky today because he was found rather quickly. The protagonist waved his hand, intending to send Lou forward. Suddenly, a turtle emerged from behind the piles of ice. Yang shuddered, not understanding what it was. The monster was wandering ahead, and he used appraisal on it. An image of an abyssal turtle appeared in front of the protagonist, and he admitted to himself that he had never heard of such a species. The guy leaned closer to the window, surprised that this monster was unique. He stood in a thoughtful pose and concluded, judging by its appearance, that it was just a useless turtle with a big head, which looked cute, but the possibility of its help in battle was doubtful. Yang summoned his staff, deciding that it did not matter and that he should still catch the turtle, since his intuition told him not to miss such a chance to get a unique and unknown monster. He stopped, noticing something. The guy took a step, came closer to the turtle and realized that it could die with 1 hit, after which he wondered if its huge head could fit into the shell. He flashed his staff and decided to check. The protagonist hit the monster on the shell. The monster tensed up. Then it pulled all its limbs inside. Lou sniffed the shell in confusion. The guy also did not understand what was going on. Yang created a magic circle for capture, surprised that that was all. 2 red messages appeared in front of him stating that the monster could not be captured. The protagonist was shocked by the result, because this had never happened before. He took the staff with both hands, assuming that he needed to inflict damage, and after the action was done, the system reported that Yang removed 1 unit of health. Then the guy thought that this attack was too weak. The protagonist swung and hit a few more times, each time receiving the same notification. The boy wiped his chin, trying to figure out what was wrong, considering he swung quite hard, but still dealt 1 damage, and thought it was some kind of joke. He looked at Lou doubtfully and commanded him to bite the turtle. The wolf pounced on the prey. He sank his fangs into the shell, but still dealt 1 damage. The pet burst into tears, but Ian could not imagine what the monster's defense was. The protagonist sat down next to the monster and thought about what to do. He smiled when he had an idea. The boy took out a meatball, deciding to try to lure the monster with food, after which he began to call the turtle and warned that it would regret it if it did not come out for such a treat. The monster pulled its head out of its shell, and Ian noticed that it worked. The protagonist placed the meatball on the floor and told the turtle that it should come to him if it wanted to eat it. The monster slowly moved towards the guy, who was pleased with the result. It approached the meatball and prepared to bite it. The turtle got angry when Ian took the food away from it. It was annoyed, and the protagonist called it to come with him if it really wanted the treat. The guy, who was holding the meat with 2 fingers, promised the monster that if he came with him, he would be able to feed it something even more delicious than meatballs. Ian took out 3 more meatballs with his other hand. He twirled the treats in his palms and declared that he would give the turtle exactly that much once they made a contract. Then there was a flash of the creature being captured. The protagonist clenched his fist, happy that he finally did it, as the system congratulated him on catching the abyssal turtle. He opened the system window and admitted that it would be easier to charm a celebrity than a single turtle with a giant head. He saw something unexpected in the description. Ian smiled, because, as it turned out, this monster could evolve. The turtle's stats window contained information, in addition to numbers, about its innate skills water ruler, which allowed it to absorb all water-type attacks and heal proportionally to the damage received, and shell hide, which allowed it to hide in its shell and increase its defense by 5 times. Yang put his hand to his chin and admitted that he couldn't believe that he had managed to find such a monster here. He smiled more reservedly and remarked that it was incredible, after which he saw something else. The guy's eyes widened, noticing the very high defense, and at the same time the small numbers of the other stats, as well as the shell hide ability. He put his hands on his hips and compared it to the defense of a level 100 monster, which explained why neither he nor Lu could damage it no matter how hard they tried. The protagonist looked down at the system window and decided to test the turtle's potential, but was immediately disappointed when he saw its minimal agility. He raised his hand and thought that the monster's potential was 0 and its intimacy was 10, which was somehow wrong. Ian turned his head and supposed that he should trust the turtle's unique rank and that it could evolve. He looked ahead and thought that no one knew what this monster would be like after evolution. The protagonist raised his hand and performed the summoning. The turtle appeared from the magic circle. For some reason, its cheeks turned red, and the system suggested giving it a name since it was the first time it was summoned. Ian approached it and thought about the name. He assumed a strange pose and decided that from now on, the monster's name would be Ben. Ben got angry because he didn't like the name. The protagonist clenched his fists and was indignant that the turtle would act like that. He got angry at Ben in response and said that he liked the name and didn't care. The protagonist and the wolf stood on a hill. The guy frowned and shouted to Lu that it was time to hunt. The protagonist's pet targeted an ice golem with a golden inscription. The living pile of rocks slammed into the ground. The wolf opened its mouth and growled. Then it grabbed the enemy. The golem gritted its teeth. Lu jumped away from it as it turned. Yang smirked and praised the pet for its good work, then urged it to continue weakening the enemy. The golem's eyes glowed even more brightly, and the boy realized that something was wrong. Ice steam was coming out of the enemy's mouth. It raised its foot to step on Lu. The protagonist became worried and shouted at the wolf to dodge as he realized that the golem was trying to use the ice wave skill. The monster slammed the ground, giving it a strong momentum. Yang jumped up and shouted at the wolf to do the same. He glanced to the side and thought that the golem would be inactive for a while after using such a powerful ability. The boy had not yet put his feet down, but he already thought that he had a chance. He smiled. Then he jumped above the monster's head. The ice golem noticed him. The protagonist swung his staff. His opponent looked scared. Ian was ready to end it. He dealt a strong blow to the golem's head. After the attack, chunks of ice broke off from the monster. The protagonist landed, and his opponent's head was smoking. His and Lu's eyes glowed red as they rushed into a joint attack. The two of them struck. Ian smiled and attempted to capture it, which was successful. He fell to the ground, breathed a sigh of relief after such a successful capture, and complained that it was very difficult to find a pet he liked. A window appeared with a description of a level 38 ice golem with the innate abilities Ice Wave, which slows down enemies in the radius and deals relatively little damage to them, and Frozen Body, which increases the owner's stats by 30% but makes him vulnerable to fire attacks. Having looked at the description with a satisfied face, Ian noticed that the hidden potential of the monster was 75, which meant that the effort was worth it, after which he decided to name the golem Biggie because it was big and reliable. He rose from the ground and concluded that all the preparations were complete and then realized that he had lost Ben. I looked behind the ice cliff. The guy found him. The protagonist picked up the turtle that had caught the fish and decided that he needed to increase the speed of pumping because he spent 2 whole days looking for the golem, after which he decided to go to the snowy mountains of Krupaya. Duke Trappin's castle, decorated with a statue of a spearman. Rena was humming songs in the kitchen. She wiped the sweat from her forehead and hoped that this time she had succeeded. The dish in front of her literally sparkled, and the system congratulated her on the successful preparation of lobster cream soup. A plate with a dish appeared in front of the girl and she was happy that she did it. And then the system reported that Rena cooked a luxurious meal for the first time and that therefore her fame increased by 12-0. The cook took the cream soup in her hands and thought that a little more and she would be able to cook a dish worth more than 10,000 gold. She touched her head and decided that now was the time to rest a little. Rena smiled sweetly and noticed that she was progressing much faster in the kitchen of the Duke's castle. She ran her finger over her lips and thought about how Ian was doing. She was scared by the system window that appeared next to her. The girl wrote to the protagonist in the chat with a smile that she had cooked in the Duke's castle and had just finished, and he guessed that Rena meant Duke Trappin. The cook stood in front of the stove again, and then Ian, after thinking for a while, asked him to help her out. She tilted her head in bewilderment and was surprised that the protagonist needed help. The hero looked at the board and wrote that he was planning to run over to her place and eat something delicious. Rina looked at the message and replied that yes, of course, she had prepared a lot of things. The girl put her hand to her mouth and wrote that she was looking forward to their meeting. She looked away and thought that she was worried about the excess food. Lucky that Ian wrote to her, hoping they would meet soon. After a moment, she widened her eyes in delight and continued to think that it was not because she wanted to see him or anything. It was not like that at all. The light fell on the stairs. The hero lowered his head and said that they would see if there was any useful information. Looking at the breaking news, he said that they had obtained new information about the summoners. The screen said that there was good news for the summoners. She heard that it was the fox that attracted so many people to the Calympus Hills. Yes, that's right, her name was Coco. The man smiled and said that it was a beautiful name and that he had heard that Coco was different from other foxes. It was true. The protagonist spat out the contents of his mouth when the girl on the screen replied that yes, she had the item can evolve in her personal information window. Ian grinned furiously and exclaimed, "What the hell? The information about evolution had already been made public." He rubbed his chin and said that it was really only a matter of time. In fact, he was glad that it took them longer than he thought. A wolf and a man appeared before his eyes, and the thought occurred to him that he thought that a huge number of people had already changed their summoner class, so it was only natural that there would be people who had tamed a monster that could evolve. Ian put a spoon in his mouth and said that it would be difficult to evolve it without training skills. He looked at the screen and asked if there was anything else. Then his eyes widened and he asked about a unique class monster. The first decorated unique class monster appeared on the screen. Ian put his hands behind his head and said that he had caught it much earlier. He raised his hand and continued to say that if they had tamed it at level 23, he thought they had barely managed to do so with the help of their guild or friends. The protagonist stretched and said that he would go study Ben. There were people walking around the large square. A guy was carrying a huge bag down the street. Sweat was pouring down the hero's face and he said that so much, and she really didn't want anything in return. Rina smiled and replied that it was nothing compared to him helping her with her class quest, which resulted in her being able to get that necklace, so it was the least she could do for him. Looking at the inventory, Ian said that wow, some of these dishes look really good. The girl flew up to him. Ian said that thank you very much. He didn't even know how to thank her. Rina replied that then. She towered over him fiercely and asked if he could fulfill 2 of her requests. The protagonist narrowed his eyes and replied that of course, whatever she wanted. Rina said that okay, her first request. She picked up the paper and continued to say that if he planned to hunt in the northern region, could he collect these ingredients? Ian replied that yes, of course, he would try. The guys looked away and Rina said that then her second request. The girl smirked and the thought occurred to her that she seemed embarrassed to ask him about this. I wonder what kind of request this is. The guy thoughtfully continued the thought that he really hoped that this would not slow down his leveling. The girl's eyes widened and she asked if he could help her with her school assignment, and the hero asked again. Rina smiled and said that Carl had mentioned that he was studying at Korea University. Ian raised his finger and said that yes, he was a freshman and he thought that the assignment, she needed something outside the game. Rina shyly continued to say that in fact, she was also studying at the same university. She was a second-year student in the Department of Hotel Culinary Arts. Ian looked away and said that I understand. Then he thought that it turned out that he and Rina would be able to go to the same university and that she was his senpai. The girl looked away and said that he liked to try delicious dishes. She would like him to try the dishes she cooked and help her choose the best among them. She needed to make her own recipe for the school assignment. The hero coughed and said that she wanted him to try her cooking and give her feedback. Rina looked back at him and said yes, they couldn't do without him. Ian stood still. Then he put his hand to his face and thought, what the hell? Why did Rina ask him to help with something like this? She didn't have any friends who could help her. Ian thought about the girl and thought that it wasn't that strange, considering her unusualness. The sun was shining on the street and he thought that for now he would focus on preparations. There were signs hanging around the protagonist and he said that this time the quest would be quite dangerous and there was very little information about it. He needed to get the best equipment he could get. Ian grinned and continued saying that he looked good. He thought he would buy it. No, he didn't need such nonsense. The guy smiled and said that almost everything was left, only the weapon remained. He clicked on one of the signs saying that he wondered if there was a bow similar to the items in the Mother Nature set. As he thought, with his current level, it was simply impossible to buy a high-level bow. He looked at the signs and said that there was no bow with a familiar enhancement enchantment. He would try to expand the search criteria. Then he zoomed in on something and asked what it was. The Ancient Summoner's steel gloves appeared in front of him and he said about the Ancient Summoner's steel gloves. He bared his teeth furiously and exclaimed at this ability. The high mountains were covered with snow. The monster's eyes flashed and someone shouted that Biggie, the ice wave. OK ran next to Ian and the hero shouted that he would attack from the front and let Lou attack from behind. A monster towered in front of the protagonist. He clenched his fist and swung at Ian. A strong explosion occurred from the impact. A board appeared in front of the hero's eyes saying that vulnerability scan was activated. Enemy weakness was detected, accuracy increased by 19%. Critical hit chance increased by 23.5%, 97% bonus damage when attacking a weak spot. Ian made a fist and thought, okay, he trusts him, his item is worth 900,000 gold. The hero frowned and shouted that he needed to go. He jumped high and cast a vulnerability scan spell. Then he delivered a sharp blow to Biggie. A bright light poured out of the protagonist's glove. Clenching his fist, the protagonist thought that the game was worth the candle. He does not regret buying them at a premium price. Information about the gloves appeared. It was heard that he was especially interested in his innate ability. Looking to the side, the protagonist said that just a minute, can these gloves strengthen Ben? If this ability is activated, will it mean that he too? Ian hid in his shell. Gritting his teeth, he said that thank God it required a physical condition. Jokes aside, instead, he would try the new skills he had obtained after reaching level 30. The monster in front of him screamed loudly. Suddenly, the hero used spatial distortion. The troll struck Biggie. Moving to another point, the protagonist shouted that it was working. Looking straight ahead, he said that even such a powerful monster as Biggie received more than 1,000 damage with just one hit. These ice trolls of level 60 are really at a certain level. A crosshair appeared on the monster. It was heard that it needed to be killed before it recovered. Suddenly, Ian struck the monster. Notifications appeared that he had dealt critical damage. He lost 596 units of health. Looking at the creature, the protagonist thought that he should just continue in the same spirit. What for? A message appeared that the ability path with the help of steel gloves was activated, borrowing the ability of Berserk Pet Lu. The protagonist's eyes suddenly lit up. He looked away furiously. The troll screamed angrily. Yang lowered his head and thought that he had become more agile and stronger. Notifications appeared that attack and agility would be increased by 30% for 15 minutes. Defense would be reduced by 30%. Swinging his hand, the hero thought that but in this state he would finish it off with one blow. The damn debuff reduced his defense by as much as 30%. Monsters with a long attack animation have a gap after each blow. Jumping up, he thought that now, messages appeared that he dealt critical damage to the ice troll. The power of his attacks would be increased for 5 seconds. The protagonist struck the troll. He smirked and looked away. Ian hit the monster again. Suddenly the troll fell to the ground. The hero stood in the smoke. A message appeared that he had defeated the ice troll. 1,060 experience points were received. A fire was burning in the middle of the forest. The people looked at each other. Looking at the girl, the guy said that they had to cordon off the area since there was a chance that they could run into ice golems here whose levels were higher than 100, to which she replied that it was understandable. Good work. Holding a glass in her hands, the girl said that the northern region was quite dangerous, but she thought that going on this expedition was a great idea. Now they had a base for their guild, to which Barry replied that he agreed. Smirking, he said that although they chose this area as a base only because there was no more free land left in the southern region, now their problem was whether they could protect this base or not. The girl clenched her fists and said that they would do their best. In the next 3 months of peace, they would use all their strength to develop their base. They should call all the guild members to the base after the expedition. The guy frowned when he heard that they would only hunt in this area from now on. Raising his finger, he said that there was only one person who was unable to farm in this place, to which she asked that one person, who? Smiling widely, Barry said that Ian, of course, he needs to continue training in the southern region. He is probably already in the northern region. Looking away, the girl said that not long ago he sent her a message asking her to share information about the northern region with him. He said that he was going to hunt in the snowy mountains of Krupia, so he wanted to find out about it. The guy looked at him in surprise and asked what was going on, what was his current level, to which he was told that she didn't know either, but it was better for them if he leveled up quickly. Barry looked away and wondered what the hell he was doing. He had no idea how he managed to do it. A view of snow-capped mountains opened up. The protagonist stretched out his hand to the side and said that they were leveling up for too long. Frowning, he added that now that the experience was divided between the four, the farming had really slowed down, although they had all finally passed level 40. The protagonist looked at the notification and said that they would see. I hope Biggie's potential reached 100 soon. He put his hands on his hips and added that what the hell, he had already reached 100. Why hadn't he evolved then? Wasn't the main condition 100 potential? Crossing his arms, Ian said that it definitely had to be at least one of the conditions. Maybe it needed something else besides potential, level, but Lou was only level 20 when he first evolved. Putting his hand to his face, he added that maybe the level requirements were different for each monster. Well, it was not something he could deal with now. The turtle stood on the ground. He could hear that he was thinking. Now he should use the training skill on Ben. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist said that but where the hell did he go this time? A view of snowy mountains opened up. He could hear that if something happened to him, a system message would appear. Where is Ben? He would give him a meatball. Peeking out from behind the mountain, The protagonist said that there he was. Watching the pet, he asked what he was doing there. Looking at the notification, Ian asked what he was eating. A message appeared that the pet Ben would absorb the mandrake, his potential increased tenfold, all characteristics increased by 5. Picking up the pet, the hero asked what, the mandrake, he ate it. Kneeling down, he added that it was a rare medical material that increased all stats by 5. Smiling, the protagonist said that if he found something like that again, he should definitely bring it to him. Okay, in return, he would give him a meatball. Looking at Ben, Ian asked what he was going to. Suddenly, he looked surprised. Looking at the entrance, the hero asked what. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist said what it was. The entrance appeared. A notification appeared that he was the first to find a hidden dungeon. It was heard that he was the first to discover it. Looking at the notification, the protagonist saw that the chance of items dropping in the dungeon was doubled for the next 5 days, to which he said that this long journey to the northern region was worth it. He gritted his teeth when he heard if he wanted to register a new dungeon. After he did so, his fame would be increased by 500, to which he replied no, if he did so, all the players nearby would come running here. Smiling widely, the protagonist thought that he didn't want to share the double chance of item drops with anyone. Looking at Ben, Ian said that good job, finally he was of some use. Standing still, he thought that well, it's time to start exploring this dungeon. The creatures were standing in the middle of the corridor. Looking straight ahead, the protagonist said that it seemed like a normal dungeon without any pitfalls. Smirking, he said that difficult dungeons are full of dangerous traps and secret ambushes. Looking to the side, the protagonist thought that he didn't feel well. What was it? It seemed like he sensed a ghost. Suddenly, the wall suddenly exploded. The monsters rushed forward. Their eyes lit up brightly, and a question was heard about an ambush. Suddenly, the golem used the ice wave skill. A blow flew at the monsters, and notifications appeared that the ghost dragon had lost 235 units of health, and the ghost dragon's speed would be reduced by 30% for 10 seconds. The creatures screamed furiously. The golem swung his hand. The monsters angrily screamed at him. The hero's eyes widened, and he wondered what the hell he should do. Lu couldn't use the berserker ability yet. Looking at the wolf, he said that he should take on the left dragon. The main thing was to buy him time, even if he couldn't attack him. The protagonist's fist lit up, and a message appeared that the path ability was activated using the ancient summoner's steel gloves. Jumping up, he thought that he was lucky. A bright glow emitted from his hand, and it was said that the ice wave ability was being borrowed. Suddenly, the protagonist struck. An ice wave rushed forward. The monsters screamed loudly. The creature looked to the side. A notification appeared that the ghost dragon had lost 635 units of health. The ghost dragon's speed would be reduced by 30% for 10 seconds. Lowering his head, the wolf heard that now, first, they would deal with this dragon. The protagonist looked at the monsters. Gritting his teeth tightly, he thought that from what he understood, these monsters were an offensive type, although their attacks were powerful, but their defense and survivability were lame. Jumping up to the monster, the protagonist added that he would deal with them one by one as quickly as he could. The creatures quickly ran towards him. Looking around, they growled. Looking to the side, Ian turned to Lu. Jumping up, he shouted that they were dodging. The wolf quickly ran forward. The hero looked to the side and said that damn, this will not be easy. Looking at the monsters, he thought that if this continues, they will be stuck here for a long time. The protagonist looked away in surprise. Looking at the pet, he said, damn Ben. A glow appeared around him when he heard that he should raise his damn shell and distract them, stop playing around. Suddenly, the pet jumped up. Looking at him, Ian thought that he could really do it. The monsters looked at him in fear. He heard that, come on, this is his Ben, just like him. The creatures swung their hands sharply. Ben hit his head. They struck him. A message appeared that he had received critical damage. Looking at his beating, the hero said, 1 damage. Grinning, he added, great job, he knew he could handle it, his damn defense is amazing. Looking away, the protagonist said, they can do it. The creatures rushed forward, hearing that everyone should attack. They stood in front of the glow. Wiping his forehead, Ian said that they did it. Looking to the side, he added that they had gone all the way to the lower level, but there was some kind of different atmosphere here. The hero asked with wide eyes that this was not a summoning magic circle. Was the dungeon boss about to spawn? Frowning, he told them to prepare to attack. A bright glow appeared in front of him. Suddenly, an unknown man appeared. Looking at him, the protagonist thought that the ghost of an old man. Standing in front of him, the man said that it seemed like he was their summoner. Ian glared at him. The room appeared. The thought arose that he was not a monster. Lowering his head, the protagonist asked what was so and who he was. Putting his hand to his face, the man said that the first one to challenge the test was the summoner. It must be fate. The protagonist opened his eyes in surprise. Standing in front of the man, he asked that his name was Oakley. Looking at him, he replied that yes, that was his name. Frowning, Ian asked what was good and why he was here. Looking straight ahead, Oakley said that he was afraid he could not answer this question yet, to which he was asked again. The man smirked slightly. Raising his staff up, he said that if he passed his test, then he would reveal all the secrets to him. The protagonist looked at him in surprise. He stretched his arms out to the sides. The protagonist gritted his teeth and asked what the. Holding the staff in his hands, the man shouted that he should listen to his call. Suddenly, blue rays appeared. Ian turned around in amazement. An explosion thundered behind them. Someone appeared from the smoke. The creature's tail appeared. He took a step forward. The dragon's head was visible among the smoke. With wide eyes, the hero asked what the chaos dragon. Raising his hands, he shouted loudly, to which the protagonist said that he was more than twice the size of the ghost dragons on the first floor. The dragon glared at him. He could hear that it was level 75, heroic level. It was mocking him on how he could defeat this monster. Crouching down, Ian thought that he would have to recall his pets if their health reached a critical state. Suddenly, the dragon attacked. A notification appeared that its body was groaning in fear of it. The hero gritted his teeth and thought that even if he died, he would take it with him. A message appeared that all stats would be reduced by 5% for 10 minutes. Pointing to the side, Oakley shouted for him to attack this man. The dragon breathed in flames and roared. Looking at it, the protagonist thought that seriously, this monster can use a fire-breathing technique. Turning his head, he shouted for them to run away. The dragon sharply breathed out flames. The flames spread throughout the room. Suddenly, an explosion erupted. Someone appeared among the flames. Young was hiding behind his shell. Gritting his teeth, he said that it was close. He couldn't believe it. Even Ben with his insane defense had lost a third of his health. Looking straight ahead, the protagonist added that if he was the same type as those ghost dragons, his defense and vitality should be low. Dodging the attack, he shouted for an ice wave. Looking at the dragon, the protagonist shouted for Lu to use berserk and attack from the flank, and then thought that he would never give up until he reached his limit. Frowning, Young used vulnerability search. Sliding on the ground, he wondered what was going on. The dragon looked away. Turning his head, the hero shouted for them to dodge. Biggie raised his hands. Suddenly, the dragon hit him with its tail. The pet's hand was cut off. A thought about him appeared. The golem looked at him in surprise. A message appeared that Biggie's pet had received a critical hit. The protagonist looked at him in amazement when he heard that he had lost 4,782 health points. Taking a step forward, he shouted, "What the hell? This is too much even for a level 70 boss." The golem lowered his head when he heard that he should go back. Ben jumped on Ian's shoulder. The dragon was attacking the wolf. His name was heard. Suddenly, Lu dealt a critical hit to him. A message appeared that the dragon had lost 1,776 health points. He would receive 355 damage per second due to the bleeding status for 10 seconds. Looking straight ahead, the protagonist thought, "Good, very good. He found this dragon's Achilles heel. Good job." The wolf looked at him in fury when he heard that he should continue attacking. Lu began to strike the dragon. The monster screamed in pain. He raised his head up. A blow flew at his tail. Suddenly, the dragon struck back. Taking a step forward, the protagonist shouted loudly that no. Frowning, he used spatial distortion. Suddenly, Ian jumped up. Ben raised his hands. The protagonist struck the monster. The dragon sharply swung its tail. Reflecting the blow, the protagonist wheezed. Looking at the notification, he saw that Ben had lost 118 units of health. Gritting his teeth, Ian thought that this damn dragon deals a critical hit every time it attacked, and yet Ben's defense was incredible. He only lost 118 units of health. The dragon screamed furiously, and the hero told Lu to tear it to pieces. The wolf dealt a critical hit to the monster. It was heard that it was excellent. With wide eyes, the protagonist thought that he had more than half of his HP left even after a critical hit. He froze, and the monster swung its tail. Yan frowned. Suddenly, a blow flew at him. The hero flew into the wall. He gritted his teeth in pain. A notification appeared that he lost 521 units of health when he hit the wall. Looking to the side, the protagonist wondered if he could win. He did not want to die. A level 70 heroic class monster was really strong. Looking angrily at his hand, he added that he would lose his precious experience if he ended up like this. The entry restriction was for as much as 24 hours, so much. Standing in the smoke, Yan said that he had to save at least Lu. He could not lose him, no matter what. Looking to the side, he added that where was he? He needed to call him back quickly. The dragon grabbed the wolf. Lu began to run away from him. Stretching his hand forward, the hero addressed the pet. The wolf was striking the dragon. A notification appeared that the damage was increased by 36% due to the attack on the enemy's wounded area. The monster lost 3,269 units of health. Looking at the messages, the protagonist thought that the increased damage was due to the attack on the wounded area. Putting his hand to his face, he added that it meant that if you attack on the wounded area, additional damage will be dealt. How could he not know about this? He does not think that other players know about this. Yang gritted his teeth and thought that in any case, now is not the time to think. The wolf stopped abruptly. Taking a step forward, he exclaimed, Blows began to fly at the dragon. A thought arose that his name was flashing, which means he had less than half of his HP left. Looking straight ahead, the protagonist thought that this was his chance, or maybe not. On the contrary, this means that after all this he managed to destroy only half of his HP. The dragon opened its mouth. A thought arose that a fucking monster. Looking away, the protagonist thought that he should soberly assess the situation, whether he could even gain the upper hand. Looking at Ben, he sighed. Ian turned around and spoke to Lou. The wolf began to disappear after the phrase that they were good, cancel the summoning. Gritting his teeth tightly, the hero said that he did not have time to restore stamina with first aid, so if he got tired when the battle dragged on, he would not be able to dodge the dragon's attacks any longer. He would not be able to win the battle relying only on Lou. Standing in front of the dragon, he added that he must minimize his losses. Suddenly, the monster screamed loudly. Taking Ben in his hand, the protagonist said, "That's right, let him come here." The monster stood on its hind legs and screamed. Squinting, Ian thought that the level loss and the 24-hour login restriction were the same. The dragon screamed loudly in front of him. Looking straight ahead, the man said that it was incredible. Raising his staff, he said that was enough. Suddenly the dragon began to disappear. The hero froze in amazement in front of it. Notifications appeared that he had cleared the Chaos Dungeon, received 133,769 experience. The level was increased to 69. With wide eyes, the protagonist wondered what was cleared. Putting a hand to his face, he added that it meant that he was not destined to defeat the Chaos Dragon in this dungeon. Sitting down on the floor, Ian asked what the hell. Walking up to him, Oakley said that it was incredible, truly incredible. He fought the Chaos Dragon so well. Looking at him, the protagonist asked what was so incredible. He lost. Standing in front of him, the man replied that no, to begin with, it was a summoning that was impossible to defeat. Congratulations, he passed the test, to which he thought, seriously, he was making a fool of him. Let him wait, the test. Pointing forward, the man asked what his name was. Sitting on the floor, the protagonist replied that it was Ian, to which he replied that he understood. Putting his hand forward, Oakley asked that he wanted to become his disciple. The path of a dragon tamer appeared. Looking at the message, Ian thought that it was a dragon tamer. Grinning, he added that they should wait. What kind of a hidden class is this? Putting his hand to his face, the hero thought that he never thought that he would ever be able to get something like this. Looking at him, the man asked what he thought. Did he want to become the successor of the legendary dragon tamer? Looking away, the protagonist thought that a dragon tamer sounded quite scary, but he wondered which was better, a master tamer or a dragon tamer. Lowering his head, he added that he easily unlocked the master tamer class at the beginning of the game. A dragon appeared behind him and Ian thought that unlocking the dragon tamer class was not an easy task anyway. Gritting his teeth, he said that it was fine. He wanted to change his class to a dragon tamer. Looking at him, Oakley said that it was great. The dragon tamer was a great class. He assured him that he would not regret this decision. Stretching his hand forward, he added that he blessed the birth of a new dragon tamer. The hero opened his eyes in surprise. Looking at his hand, the man said that this was impossible. What happened? With wide eyes, the protagonist asked what was going on. Notifications appeared that it was impossible to change the class to a lower one. He failed to change the class to a dragon tamer, to which he thought that he failed to change the class. Adjusting his glasses, Oakley said that I understand, he is already on the path of a tamer. Standing in front of the protagonist, he said that he knew he was not an ordinary tamer because of his blood red wolf familiar, but he did not think that he was a taming master, to which he thought that is, a taming master is actually a higher rank than a dragon tamer. Putting his hand to his face, the protagonist asked what his Lu was special, and then thought that he would try to gather as much information as possible. Maybe he would learn something useful. Looking straight ahead, the man asked what Lu was, saying that it must be the name of his wolf. Putting his hand to his face, he said that his Lu was definitely a rare level blood red wolf, but its strength seemed to be higher than other specimens. But this was only possible if the tamer had an unusual approach. Ian froze, thinking that he was able to accurately determine his level and status. It was impressive, even for an NPC. He thought he was a legendary dragon tamer for a reason. Standing in front of the man, he asked what he could ask, why he was waiting for the challenger so much, to which Oakley replied that of course, he almost forgot about the most important thing. He was just distracted by the peculiarity of his class. Grinning, the hero asked what about the most important thing, and then thought that he knew it. There should be a reward for passing such a difficult test. Standing next to the man, he added that he almost left empty-handed because of this damned old man, to which the man replied that yes, he will go with him. The golem opened his eyes wide. The guy struck him. Gritting his teeth, he said that he did it. The guy smirked and said good job, so they have met the minimum requirements to enter the village, right? To which Barry replied yes, they have reached a territory value of 1,000 units, and he added that it was good, let's go. The guy smiled when he heard about the territory upgrade. The Lotus base was upgraded to Lotus Village. The leader of Lotus Village was automatically appointed as the guildmaster. He laughed and asked what the hell, said that he became the leader of the village. Barry frowned and said that this was the guild base upgrade they had been dreaming of. Looking to the side, he added that he wondered if Ian was okay. The view of the mountains opened up, a sigh was heard. The protagonist looked tiredly and said that 10 hours of sleep in 5 days made him want to sleep even in the game. His mind was foggy and his eyes were bleeding. Taking a step forward, he asked why he agreed to this. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist said that he was beginning to regret it. Standing on the cliff, he asked what the forced mission was. Looking at him, the man replied that it was true, those who passed the test could receive a reward along with a mission that could not be refused. Ian put his hand to his face when he heard that he wouldn't have a choice, to which he thought, damn, the risk is too great. If he loses or refuses the quest after accepting it, he will lose reputation units. Looking at the man, he asked what he thought. He can't tell him in advance what kind of quest it is, to which Oakley replied that he can't until he decides. Putting his hand to his face, the protagonist thought that he can't refuse. Smirking, he said that great, he will accept this quest. Looking straight, the man replied that he knew he would accept. A message appeared that he accepted Oakley's offer. It said about the traces of a forgotten ancient monster. He accepted this quest. Looking at the message, the protagonist thought that the difficulty is B, but he hasn't even reached level 50. Isn't that too much? Well, at least there is no time limit. Looking straight ahead, Young added that but if he can't form a party during the quest, does that mean he can't do anything in a party until he completes the quest? Maybe it's impossible to do alone now, but it will be possible after he levels up and becomes stronger. The man looked down. Handing over the crystal, he said let him take this, to which the hero asked what it was. A notification appeared that he had received the Divine Dragon's Soul Stone. Looking straight ahead, Oakley said that in truth, he was a summoner who lived 1,000 years ago. The man stood near the dragons. It was said that in his era, there were legendary monsters that no longer exist, such as his pet that he had been with for a long time, as well as his best friend, the battle dragon, 1,000 years ago. He was the leader of the dragon tamers that have long been gone, and the battle dragon was one of the 5 divine dragons. Oakley extended his staff forward. It was heard that 10 centuries ago, a settlement of dragon tamers in the northern continent, Perlania Valley, was attacked by evil dragons, resulting in countless dragons and tamers dying. The evil dragons were too many, and their master was stronger than the battle dragon. A crystal appeared. It was said that this was why he had to escape and hide here in the Krupia Snow Mountains, because he had a debt to his comrade. The evil dragons would not allow them to escape, so he had no choice but to seal himself and the dragon here underground. Looking to the side, Oakley said that this was why he lived for 1,000 years in this place where not a single glimmer of sunlight could be seen, all for the sake of reviving his dear friend. Looking at the crystal, the protagonist asked, that is, he can help him if he takes this to the spatial mage. Raising his hand up, the man replied that the spatial mage would tell him how to return the soul of the battle dragon to this world. He originally planned to make him continue the legacy of the dragon tamers by passing on the dragon's soul to him, because then he would be able to leave this world without any regrets and he would become his faithful companion. Lowering his head, he added that however, he never imagined that there would be someone with a class higher than a dragon tamer. He resigned himself. Standing in front of him, the protagonist asked that only dragon tamers can restore the soul stone, to which Oakley replied that no, however, only the innate skills of a dragon tamer will allow a battle dragon to be reborn into a new dragon. Looking at him, Young asked that if he is not a legendary dragon tamer, why does not he do it himself, to which the man replied that he is sealed, and for the same reason cannot use his abilities to do so. Young looked down and thought that damn, a familiar with the title of Divine Dragon would definitely be powerful. What a waste. Well, but that must mean that the taming masterclass will be even more impressive. Looking at the feather, Oakley said that in any case, if he gives this soul stone to the spatial mage, he will find a way to return the battle dragon in some other way, and let him take it. This is his reward. A feather appeared. A notification appeared that he received a tamer feather ornament. He heard that it was an artifact left by the leader of the dragon tamers. However, he must find a spatial mage to dispel the seal on the artifact. Only then will he see its true power. Looking at the notification, the protagonist said that thanks, he will find this spatial mage at any cost, and then thought that it sounded cool. This feather may be useless now, but he was still going to complete the quest. A glow appeared around the man and he said that in order to find the spatial mage, he needs to go to the eastern part of the southern continent. There he will find the spatial magic tower. Finally, he no longer regrets anything and can rest in peace. Standing in front of the glow, the protagonist heard that let him resurrect the descendant of the divine dragons in this world. Holding the crystal in his hands, he said that it feels like he took a really incredible quest. I bet the difficulty of this quest is much higher than rank B. In addition, the quest has a side task related to the spatial mage and the stone. Holding the pen in his hands, Ian said that he was on fire. Looking at the message, he said that it was a sealed item, but perhaps he will check. The hero opened his eyes in surprise and asked what the hell, legendary class. Information about the item appeared, to which he thought that it was simply incredible. Frowning, the protagonist thought that the increase in stats alone was amazing, and it was tied to his account. He would have no analogs if this seal was removed. The stats were shown, and he thought that these parts about sealing were quite unpleasant. However, there was a catch. It might seem pointless to capture many monsters, but people were playing soccer, and he thought that if his familiar ran out of health during the battle, he could swap it out for another one, just like swapping players in sports. Monsters appeared behind the protagonist, and he thought that taming dragons was a tamer's dream. He would definitely tame a dragon someday in the future, so the lowered stat requirements were great news. Holding a pen in his hands, the protagonist thought that he would complete this quest no matter what. With his eyes wide open, he said that he had to be at least level 70 to complete a B rank quest without a party, so he should work on his level now. Looking at the monsters, Yan said that but he hadn't slept for 5 days. Lu suddenly rushed forward. His eyes lit up and he exclaimed. The creatures were attacking the dragons. Suddenly, a devastating explosion occurred. A notification appeared that the level had increased. He had reached level 50. Looking away, the protagonist said that let them just look at them showing off. Good job. A message appeared that he had received the ability of summoning magic. He had received the ability of spirit magic. Sitting down on the ground, he said that he was so tired. He had reached level 50 before his dungeon pioneer buff had worn off. Looking at the notification, the protagonist said that everything that was theoretically possible was possible in practice, but what were the abilities of summoning magic and spirit magic for? Did they belong to the summoner class? Stretching, he said that well, he didn't think this was something he could handle right now. He needed to sleep urgently. Standing still, Ian heard that he was the first summoner to reach level 50. He had received a reward. The Summoner's Tower would be built. The contribution was increased by 5,000 points. Summoners of the Empire could now receive class-related quests in the tower, to which he said that he was the first to reach level 50. He felt that he had done something amazing. Looking at the notification, he saw that the Summoner's Prophet quest had been activated, to which he asked what kind of quest it was. An Imperial quest appeared. Raising his eyebrows, the protagonist said that the Imperial quest was a special quest that would bring him great fame and rewards, as well as contribution points, and with high contribution points, he could get a noble title. Clenching his fist, he added that he knew that he was generously depriving the players who were advancing with rewards. Suddenly, the protagonist disappeared and said that he was too sleepy. As soon as he connected, he would immediately go to Mulan, so it was time to sleep. The view of the capital of the Empire of Lutzifel opened up. Suddenly the earth shook. A cry about an earthquake was heard. People looked at each other in surprise and asked again. A glowing sphere appeared in the air. It was heard what it was. Suddenly the building began to be built, and someone shouted that a new tower was being built. A tower for one of the new classes. What class was it? The tower was being completed. It was heard what it was. Players paid attention to the notification. It was said that a level 50 summoner appeared in the Empire. The Summoner's Tower will be built in Mulan. The tower fee has been increased. Empire summoners can now receive quests. People looked surprised and asked what the Summoner's Tower was. The first of all the new classes appeared, and the man said that they were kidding. The first to reach level 50. Who is this summoner? A view of the building opened up. The protagonist was lying on the bed. Leaving the room, he said that he had not slept like this for a long time. Food was standing on the table. It was heard that he would first have breakfast, at the same time, read the formulas. The laptop was next to the food. It was said that why are there so many new messages today? The forum appeared, and the protagonist asked what dozens of pages of messages overnight. Looking at the laptop, he added that the Summoner's Tower, it seems, everyone is impressed by his achievement. Grinning, he added that everyone is going crazy. Ian started eating and asked what it was. It sounded like he knew the identity of the level 50 summoner that they were all interested in, to which he asked where from. Closing his eyes, the protagonist said that usually such messages are clickbait, but pointing to the screen, he added that he just can't resist checking. Suddenly, the protagonist opened his eyes in surprise. Gritting his teeth, he said that it was him. Suddenly, Ian moved into the game. Angrily looking down, he said that he was angry. The hero furiously said that these damn idiots, fake, seriously, seeing the messages about him. He abruptly summoned Lu. Grinning, the protagonist said that he was his good one. If Ben was as good as him, he thinks he would summon him too. Stretching his hand forward, he summoned Ben. Suddenly, he appeared. Putting his hand to his face, Ian asked that he missed him. The pet looked at him angrily. Looking at him, the hero asked him what he was upset about carrying him on his back, and then thought that it looked like it. Putting his hand forward, he added that he had nothing to fear when he was behind him, asked that he was not going to protect him. Seriously. The protagonist crouched down and said that if he protected him, he would give him 3 meatballs in the morning and 4 in the evening. Got it. The turtle smirked, and he said that he was good and then thought that he was cute. A notification appeared about a new message. Looking to the side, Ian asked if it was Barry. The guy gritted his teeth and greeted him. Putting his hands forward, he asked what the hell he did. Frowning, the guy asked that he was the summoner who reached level 50, to which the hero thought that he was the only person who understood him. Looking at another notification, he added that someone else besides Barry sent him a message. Seeing the girl's message, the protagonist thought that she knew that he was the level 50 summoner and immediately wrote to him. Grinning, he added that even Barry doubted it. Rena was a really good person. It was not for nothing that he decided to help her. Clicking on the notification, Ian said that yesterday he reached level 50 and immediately went to bed, so he could not answer. He entered the game literally a couple of minutes ago. Closing his eyes, he said that it seems that she is not online, maybe Barry is online. A correspondence with his friend appeared. The hero put his hand to his face, reading that there was only a week left before the opening of the Imperial Arena, that he was thinking about staying at level 50 and participating as a newbie. To which he thought that exactly how could he forget about the Imperial Arena? If he wins, he can get 50,000 glory points. Raising his hand, the protagonist said no problem, a week was a long time, but he thought he would just do something else besides leveling up, to which the guy replied, okay, good luck, see you soon. He smirked and said, in that case. Yan looked at the turtle. He picked it up and asked what they would do. He said, yep, they would do the Summoner's Prophet quest. A view of the Summoner's Tower opened up. Looking at it, the protagonist thought that this was a sign of his achievement. Raising his eyebrows, he said that he was really proud to see this tower, and it was well decorated. The protagonist approached the building and said, okay, he had a lot of free time, so he would do something else before going to the Emperor. Raising his head up, he added that this place looked a lot like an archer's tower. Ian started to walk up the stairs, saying that this meant that the Artifact Exchange Center was probably on the 5th floor as well, where he could exchange his earned contribution points for items or skill books. Smiling widely, he added that this was it. The girl stood in front of him and said that this was the Artifact Exchange Center. How could she help him? To which the protagonist replied that he would like to look at the other artifacts inside. The girl smirked and replied that she understood. Maybe she would know his name. She would check his contribution points. Looking at her, the protagonist replied that his name was Ian. Stretching her hand out to the side, she said that it was okay, let him wait for a few minutes. Smirking, the girl asked that so he was a prophet. Standing in front of her, Ian wondered why she was so happy about this and then replied that she was. Taking his hand, the elf said that he should follow him. They have many artifacts and spell books that he can get in exchange for contribution points. By the way, he currently has 5,000 contribution points. Pointing to the side, she added that he should take a look and tell her if there is anything he would like to receive. Putting his hand to his face, the hero thought that good, he will see what they have. Looking at the artifacts, he added that he should look through all the options. The protagonist took the steel sword of the ancient summoner and thought that this item is the same type as his gloves that he recently bought at the auction. Looking at the item, he added that 350 points are treasure. Well, about the cost of this item, B-level quests give about 200 and 400 contribution points, so it is not that expensive. A feather appeared. A thought arose that I wonder if there is something similar to that feather here, and that he can buy it with contribution points. It seems that the first time he saw a legendary rank item was at level 80 in the Archer Tower. Looking at the artifacts, Young said that that was all. The girl smirked and asked that he did not find anything to his liking. Putting his hand to his face, the hero answered that yes, nothing really interested him, and then thought that maybe he should not spend contribution points now and buy something worthwhile later. Taking a step forward, the girl asked that in that case, how about checking the skill books and spells in this room, to which he asked again. Lowering her head, she answered that yes, she is sure there is something here that will interest him. The elf smirked slightly. Looking to the side, the hero said that all right. A view of the top of Krupia opened up. The monster screamed furiously. Jack raised the knife up. Suddenly, it rushed forward. The guy swung the weapon. A blow flew at the monster. Its health began to drain. A message appeared that the ice troll's defense was lowered. Looking straight ahead, he asked if he was alive. An ice cliff appeared. Jack looked to the side and said that well, that can be fixed. He quickly ran behind the monster. 2 blades appeared in his hands. The creature looked to the side in fear. The guy swung them sharply. A glow appeared around the blade. Jack struck the monster. Looking straight ahead, he said that is expected from a level 65 ice troll. Holding the weapon in his hands, he added that he thought it would take another half a day to reach level 50. Taking hold of the mask, the guy said that by the way, he was still level 49, and yet there was a new summoner user who reached level 50 a few days ago. Yes. He gritted his teeth and added that their classes were compatible. He couldn't wait to see him. Rushing forward, the guy said that there were 4 days left until the opening of the Imperial Arena. He had nowhere to rush. Suddenly, he jumped up. Jack was flying over the gorge. He began to fly down. The guy landed at the very bottom. The bird suddenly rushed upward. It cut the air with its wings. A glow appeared near the man's hand. He gritted his teeth tightly. Grinning, the hero asked what this book was. People were standing in the square. Looking at the books, the protagonist said that well, he started by buying these two. Information about the wall of flame and the galvanic wave appeared. Pulling the book forward, he said that this skill is not bad, its attack power is relatively small for a heroic skill, but additional effects such as paralysis are very useful. The skill characteristics were displayed. It was heard that it seemed that this was how spirit and summoning magic were used. Perhaps he would start by learning them. Gritting his teeth, Yang used the skill book. The book opened. Notifications appeared that he had learned the lightning spirit summoning skill using the skill book. He had learned the galvanic wave skill using the skill book. A glow appeared near his hand and he asked what it was. Suddenly, a bird appeared in the air. It flapped its wings. Looking at it, the protagonist said that the lightning spirit, a message appeared that it was the first time he summoned the lightning spirit, he could give it a name. Looking straight ahead, he asked that he should give it a name. Raising his head, the protagonist said that his name would be. He shuddered in fear from the bird. Wide-eyed, Yang said her name. Stretching his hand forward, the protagonist said that her name would be Jakey. Smirking, he said that it was quite a simple and cute name. Stretching his hand, the protagonist said that let her come here. Looking at the bird, he made an analysis. Information about the lightning spirit appeared. It was heard that it meant that it could not be used in battle. This explained why leadership was not required for it. Jakey looked straight ahead. It was said that he believed that he just needed to think of it as a guide, which was required in order to use lightning-type summoning magic. Raising his hand, Yan said that it was very nice to have a strong spirit from the very beginning, but pumping it from scratch was even more pleasant. A view of the city opened up, and it was heard that it was time to meet the emperor. The protagonist walked across the square. Suddenly, weapons were displayed in front of him. Gritting his teeth, the guard asked what the purpose of his visit was. Looking at him in surprise, the protagonist thought, what? Before resetting his old character, he could easily enter any place. He needed to show them a pass or something like that. Grinning, he added that oh yeah, the light of the prophet. Putting his hand on his chest, Yan introduced himself. Looking at him, the guard heard that he came here at the personal invitation of the emperor. Closing his eyes, he replied that he should wait. He would go and ask the commander, to which the hero replied that of course, he would wait here. A castle appeared. An appeal to the prophet was heard. The man extended his hand and said that he was Charlie, the guard commander. He had not warned the guards in advance, so he made him wait. He deeply apologized for his rudeness. The protagonist grinned and thought about how it was. He was so polite because it was an imperial quest, and then said that it was okay. His name was Ian. Pointing to the side, the man said that he would take him inside, let him follow him. They walked along the corridor. Looking at the guard commander, Ian wondered what level the head of security was. An image of a man appeared. The thought appeared that he was about level 90. Extending his hand forward, the hero made an analysis. Looking at the characteristics, he thought that it was amazing. The protagonist put his hand to his face and thought that the captain was level 115. Even the top 1 player of Kylan seemed to have not yet reached level 120. Looking down, he added that what about the guards? Frowning, Ian thought about how the average level of the guards varied between levels 104 and 107. It was simply astonishing. He thought that this was why the leading guilds could not establish their base on the continent of Kolinar. The guards appeared, and the thought arose that if they interfered with the affairs of the empire, the entire guild would be destroyed. Putting his hand to his face, the hero thought that their guild had decided to establish a base in the northern region, not here. Walking forward, he added that he needed to quickly raise his level and help them. He needed to secure the land around the base. A view of the entrance to the office opened up. Sitting at the table, the man asked that he was Ian. Sitting opposite, the protagonist answered that yes, that was right. Looking straight ahead, he thought that he expected to see an old man with gray hair. The man crossed his arms. The thought arose that but he really was young. All information about him was hidden. The hero looked at him and said that he heard that he wanted to see him, to which he was told that he was right. When he heard that such a brilliant person like him appeared in their empire, he immediately wanted to talk to him in person. With his eyes widened, the protagonist said that it was clear. A notification appeared that he met with Emperor Celias within the allotted time. He completed the quest Prophet of Summoning. His fame increased by 1,250. The man smirked. The thought appeared that he would get 1,250 fame just from meeting him. The imperial quests were really on another level. Holding a cup in his hands, the emperor said that he was very excited to hear about him. He knew why. Adjusting his hair, he added that he had been looking for an experienced summoner like him for a long time, to which Ian asked what and for what. The guy glared at him furiously and asked that how dare he interrupt the emperor. Celias waved his hand and said that it was okay. He was an adventurer who was not familiar with imperial etiquette. Looking at them, the hero thought that it was close, and the guy said that nevertheless. Looking to the side, he added that he thought that he would not be able to withstand even one blow from his blade. The guard's weapon appeared. The thought appeared that his sword was clearly of the highest rank. Frowning, the emperor asked what he knew, what mythical creature symbolized their empire. The protagonist looked at him in surprise. Raising his eyebrows, he thought that a mythical creature. A portrait of an animal appeared. He heard that it was a griffin. Well, there are many who do not know this, but it seems that he is well informed. Closing his eyes, Yang thought that they have a griffin painted at every step. He gritted his teeth when he heard that about half a year ago, their empire found a griffin nest in the Sikar desert, and of course, got an egg, to which he thought, well, griffins really do exist. Crossing his legs, the emperor said that, however, the problem is that this egg has not hatched yet. Grinning, he added that he would like him to find a way to help the egg hatch. Information about the quest appeared. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist thought, how should he know how to nurse it, and how should he hatch the egg? A portrait of the animal appeared, and the hero thought, what is he, the mother of griffins, and how should he hatch this egg? The protagonist frowned, thinking about the fact that the time limit is unknown, and how to understand this at all, and where should he even start. Sitting at the table, Ian thought about how the stakes were too high, he couldn't afford to lose his closeness to the emperor, and then said that yes, he would try. A message appeared that he had accepted the quest. Sighing, the protagonist said that things were only getting worse and worse. He had accidentally received 2 global quests. A memory of the crystal appeared, and he thought that at least he knew where he needed to go for the quest of the traces of a forgotten ancient monster. The man smirked and said that he wanted him to find a way to help this egg hatch, and the protagonist thought that, to be honest, he didn't fully understand the essence of the quest, what exactly he was supposed to do. Stretching his hand up, Ian said that in any case, he couldn't handle them now. First he had to take care of the arena that Barry had talked about. Looking at the message, he added that there were 5 days left before the opening of the Imperial Arena. He needed to increase his level of new skills, asked what location he should choose then. Grinning, the hero said that he would go to the ant lair. Looking to the side, he asked about the message. Clicking on the notification, the protagonist said that it was Rena. A correspondence with a girl appeared. A view of a coffee shop opened. Grinning, the girl said that she was sitting in a cafe near the school and was planning to discuss her task with a friend. Looking to the side, she added that she was wondering if he would have some free time later so that they could have lunch together. Grinning, Ian thought about lunch with Rena. To be honest, he had not been to a cafe for a long time. He closed his eyes and added that no, skills first. The protagonist put his head down and said that he would forgive her. They would eat another time. He had just arrived at the ant lair, so it was a bit of an inconvenient time, and then thought that he had to lie. Looking at his phone, the girl said that I see, then let him send her a message when he finished farming. It might take her a while to read it, so she would give him her number, to which he replied that of course. Sitting on the floor, the protagonist thought about how instead of having lunch, he was going to hunt. That's who he was. A view of the gorge opened up, and someone exclaimed in surprise. Standing in front of the ants, Ian said that as he expected, there were a lot of mobs here. Looking straight ahead, he added that here is his precious experience. Raising his hand up, the hero said okay. The creatures rushed forward, hearing the command. Biggie swung, hearing that he should attack first. He looked forward angrily. A message appeared that the pet had received 201 damage from the giant ant, and then received another 376. Hearing the command, Biggie used an ice wave. A blow flew at the ants. They screamed in pain. The wolf rushed forward, hearing that now, let him go. Lou screamed furiously. He began to attack the ants, and the hero praised him. The protagonist looked at Ben. He frowned. The pet looked forward angrily. Then he sighed. Suddenly, the turtle grew in size. Grinning, Ian said that now he didn't even need to tell him what to do. Good job. Stretching his hand forward, he added that it was time to try out the galvanic wave in battle. Putting his hands out to the sides, the protagonist used the galvanic wave, and then thought that he should just throw them at the ants. The protagonist waved his hands in front of the ant. The spheres with lightning hung in the air. Gritting his teeth, Ian asked what was wrong. Why were they flying so slowly? Standing in front of the ants, the hero asked what they could hit with such speed. The sphere flew past the ant. The creature, standing in front of the protagonist, asked that he really thought they would get hit by it. Looking at his hand, he said that he needed to wait a little bit first. Clenching his fist tightly, Ian added that there was no other choice. Rushing forward, the hero shouted that he would just make sure they hit. He ran towards the ant. The protagonist angrily gritted his teeth. Suddenly, he struck the monster. A notification appeared that the galvanic wave skill had dealt 1,179 damage to the giant ant. The ant's head was cut off. A thought arose that the paralysis had not worked. The probability was 15% right. Suddenly, Ian struck the monsters again. Looking at the notifications, he thought that yes, that's it, this skill is best for farming. Standing in front of the ants, the hero said that good, now the real grind will begin. He laughed and added that he loved this kind of farming. Looking at the message, the protagonist said that he finally got 99.9%. It took him a whole day, and he could have reached level 51 if he had killed a few more. Standing near the pets, he added that it was fine, they would be back, and then asked where Ben had gone. Stretching his hand forward, Ian asked what he was doing. Gritting his teeth, he shouted that he should wait. No, this. Ben was eating plants. The protagonist waved his hand and cancelled the summoning. The pet evaporated, and he sighed. Ian gritted his teeth tightly. Hearing that he had destroyed the giant ant egg, he had received 36 experience points and then received another 32 experience. A message appeared in front of the hero that his level had been increased to 51. Suddenly, he fell to his knees. Clutching his head, the protagonist shouted that no, he was level 51. Ian lowered his head down. The hero opened his eyes wide and said that he was too greedy. He should have stopped hunting at about 98%. He would bring him to his deathbed. Damn Ben. The protagonist put his hands on his hips and asked what he should do. Raising his hand, he added that well, he had worked hard, it was time for him to rest. Putting his hand to his face, Ian said that it seemed that he could only lower his level by committing suicide, that is, by killing himself. Closing his eyes, he added that he would hide all the items that could drop after death. The hero looked at the sword and said that this item was not particularly important to him, so he would use it. Lowering his head, he added that now he should stab himself. The protagonist pinched himself. He closed his eyes because of the pain. Notifications appeared that he had lost experience due to death. His level had been lowered to 50th. He would not be able to connect to the game for 24 hours. People were walking around the city. Looking away, Ian wondered what he should talk about alone with Rena. It would be extremely awkward. Looking at the girl, he added that she wanted to meet in the cafeteria, right? The girl looked away. The thought occurred to him that he didn't know that such a beauty was studying at their university. Walking towards her, the hero thought that she was a celebrity. She was too cute and beautiful. Standing in front of him, Rena asked that it was him, to which he replied that yes, and asked that she was Rena. She smirked and said that yes, it was her. He looked exactly like in the game. It seemed that he didn't customize his character at all when he created it. Looking at her, the protagonist said that yes, he was not one to care about appearance, and then thought that she looked much more beautiful than her character in Kylan. The girl closed her eyes and said that she tried to make a beautiful character, asked that that's why he didn't recognize her. Yes, he was disappointed, to which Ian thought that he thought, in real life she looks much more beautiful. He smiled broadly and asked if they could have lunch, said that he had not had breakfast this morning, so he was very hungry now. A cafe appeared, and it was heard that of course, she knew a place, they would go there, yes of course. The girl looked at the food very carefully. Flames flew out of the hero's mouth. They said goodbye to each other. A view of the balcony opened up. It was heard that he was tired. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist said that he had used up all his energy. Women really are very terrifying creatures. Grinning, he asked what and still, when would he have lunch with such a goddess again? Looking at the capsule, Ian said that he would return to the game. He still could not connect there. Grinning, he added that nevertheless. Looking to the side, the hero said that it was cool. The capsule was closed. A view of the stadium opened up. A loud scream was heard. The people shouted enthusiastically. It was said that hello to everyone. This is YTBC, a representative game broadcast in Korea. Pointing to himself, the guy said that it was nice to meet you. He is reporter Haynes, and the girl said that she is reporter Louise. Looking at the stadium, the reporters said that there are a lot of people today. Isn't it? Of course, the arena has become much hotter than a month ago. Although this is not even the top league, 3 new classes have been added. How does he think which class will demonstrate the strongest abilities? Looking to the side, the guy said that he thinks it will be the assassin class. It is a class that has much higher offensive power compared to the dark sorcerer and summoner classes. The protagonist looked at the stadium. It was heard that it looked like the first preliminary match was about to begin. People walked towards each other. It was heard that it was the assassin, a new class in the first match. His opponent was a warrior. Jack pulled his sword forward. It was said that it would be a beautiful sight. Do not look away. A notification appeared that the match would begin in 5 seconds. The protagonist lowered his head down. Frowning, he thought that the killer, I wonder how he will fight. People stood in front of each other. Loud shouts were heard for them to begin. The guy swung his sword and shouted. Jack froze, looking straight ahead. The warrior swung his sword at him. A bright beam appeared from the blow. The guy moved behind his back. The thought arose that the invisibility skill, he must be preparing for a surprise attack. Suddenly, Jack struck the warrior's back. Looking to the side, Ian thought that damn, he is good. The guy's eyes lit up, and he added that this killer caught his attention. Looking to the side, the warrior sighed. He frowned and thought that they were kidding. He lost almost half of his health. Holding the weapon in his hands, the guy added that he still couldn't just give up, let him die. The warrior swung his sword and shouted about the blast wave. Jack threw the blades at him sharply. The guy opened his eyes in surprise. The attacks were flying straight at him. He screamed loudly in pain. Jack took a step forward. People enthusiastically shouted about the victory. Notifications appeared that Jack won the match. He would get double points for winning this match. Putting his hand to his face, the protagonist thought that this was incredible. Looking down, he added that this guy was really good. The guy looked at him. His eyes suddenly lit up. The protagonist clenched his teeth tightly. Jack stood still, appeared to be looking at him. Frowning, Ian thought that maybe he imagined it. The guy's eyes lit up. They looked at each other. He closed his eyes and walked away. The thought arose that there were many rankers in Kylan that no one knew. He should be on guard. Sitting at the table, the hero asked what he should take with him. The warriors were fighting. It was heard that all the other matches were a complete disaster, so there was no point in watching them. Looking at the message, he said that it would be better if he never saw this. Stretching his hand forward, the protagonist said that he knew that these were preliminary matches of the Rookie League below level 50, but it was still terrible. Looking at things, he added that he was ashamed that he had ridiculed him for his skills. Compared to them, he was the god of the game. It was heard that the next match would be with him. Getting up from his chair, Yan said that finally, it was said that as soon as he heard his name, then he should not hesitate and go to the waiting room. Pets appeared behind him. People were standing in the stadium. Enthusiastic cries were heard. The hero frowned, hearing about the greatest dark sorcerer. Jimenez grinned slightly. Looking straight ahead, the protagonist thought that Biggie would be his trump card. The sorcerer raised his hand. It was heard that he looked at him, no, at him. The girls smiled. It was heard that he would transfer them to the paradise of dark magic. Let him destroy the summoner. The guy put his hands out to the sides, hearing that he was the first place among dark sorcerers, to which Ian thought that the top one among dark sorcerers, he is the best summoner. Grinning, he added that if it was an assassin, he would have problems, but with a dark sorcerer, he just needs to be careful with skills like Bone Prison and AoE debuffs. Looking at Lu, the hero thought that in addition, their life points are lower than those of ordinary sorcerers and archers. He will act aggressively. Stretching his hand forward, the mage asked that he was Ian, said that he was glad to meet you. Frowning, the protagonist answered that he was, and then thought that this guy was too greasy. Shaking his hand, the guy said that it was nice to meet you. It was heard that the match would start in 5 seconds. Looking straight ahead, Young told Lu to focus on him once the match started, understood, and then thought that his opponent would most likely also attack with all his might from the start. Raising his head up, he added that summoners are considered very weak, since without their pets, they can be said to be useless. Taking a step forward, the hero thought that but he has a few trump cards up his sleeve. Hearing that the match had started, the protagonist jumped up and thought that here he is. Looking to the side, Jimenez asked in surprise what, and then thought that he expected to fight against. He just rushes in. Suddenly, he used the Bone Prison skill. Jumping up, the protagonist thought that he had foreseen this. The wolf looked up at him. With wide eyes, the guy thought, what kind of joke is this? He is definitely a summoner. He looks more like a top assassin. Smiling, Ian thought that it was easy to dodge if he could see what kind of skill it was. Besides, he had put almost all his points into agility. The hero was approaching the mage. Gritting his teeth, he activated the ability to search for vulnerability. The wolf rushed forward and shouted, activating the berserker skill. Suddenly, the sorcerer summoned a skeleton warrior. Raising his staff up, he shouted for them to stop them. The skeletons looked straight ahead. They could be heard to stop them. The monsters lined up in a row. Grinning, the protagonist thought that he was waiting for this too. Stretching his hand forward, he summoned Biggie. He shouted furiously. Shouts were heard that it was a golem, an ice golem. This guy was crazy. Frowning, Jimenez asked what the hell? Impossible. Stretching his hand forward, Ian answered no. It was possible. Suddenly, an ice wave flew at the skeletons. Particles flew in the air. The blows flew at the skeletons. The guy gritted his teeth. Shouts were heard. What was that? Amazing? Such tension? What an incredible match. Not even 30 seconds had passed. The wolf ran forward at a rapid pace. He was approaching the guy. Lu circled around the guy. Notifications appeared that he had dealt a critical hit. The mage had lost 3,157 health units. Jimenez would receive 515 damage per second due to the bleeding status for 10 seconds. He had lost 2,576 health units. Stretching his hand forward, the guy thought, this fucking wolf, what the hell, how can it deal so much damage? And it is used by a summoner who is not higher than level 50. Running up to him, the protagonist shouted that he was too slow. Lightning appeared around his fist. He struck the guy. The protagonist stood still. People looked at him in surprise. A message appeared that the player Jimenez was eliminated from the match. As his health fell below 5%, the player Yan wins. Standing in the stadium, the protagonist heard shouts that this is incredible, awesome. The commentators froze in amazement. It was heard that it was incredible. It is hard to believe that summoners are so strong. Is it possible that this summoner got an incredible hidden class? Haynes smirked and said that this is an incredible fighting force, especially this giant wolf with a red mane. He killed the first in the ranking of Dark Sorcerers Jimenez in just 3 hits. Looking at the hero, he added that most likely he had a pet that specialized in agility. but it was still an incredible sight. Wiping the blood, the guy thought that damn, he was too self-confident because of his class. He even wore gloves like a complete noob in the game, so he thought that. Clenching his fist, he added that he couldn't believe he was eliminated in the first round of the qualifiers. Even though he was the #1 dark sorcerer in the game, he could have won if he hadn't been so careless. Looking at the hero, the mage wondered what he was thinking. Taking a step forward, the protagonist thought that if this dark sorcerer was the #1 in the game, he was disappointed. He was just terrible anyway. The pets followed him, and he added that no one should look down on summoners in Kylan now. Lou, Biggie, and Ben stood and watched. Around them they were saying that this electric skill was great, also asking where to catch a wolf like that. They drank coffee until a girl told the guy that the beginner league was at an unprecedented level. Haynes agreed with her. He started drinking and saying that the two guys developed their characters differently than the rest. Raising a thumbs up, he continued, because he thought he had seen this summoner and his wolf before. He opened his mouth and remembered that he had met him before. It was the guy he had met on the ghost ship when they were going on the wizard's quest. Louise smiled and said that it was incredible luck. The guy agreed with her. Taking her hand, he said that the next match would soon start and they needed to go. Jack grabbed his scarf with his finger. He looked at the screens with a serious face. His eyes widened and he smiled when he saw something on the screen. The guy showed a fist and said that they were now on level 64. Walking, he continued that if he won, he would get 100,000 glory as well as a full set of level 50 items for the summoner class, and when he finished, he would continue grinding. The audience shouted for Ian to show everyone. Behind the main character, there was a wolf. For the audience, Lou was cool and the turtle was cute. The girl stood with a bow in her hand. Her face was dissatisfied. The guy and Greta were standing not far from each other. For him, the girl seemed familiar. Raising his finger up, he remembered that she was on a quest with goblins and also wondered if she was above level 50. Pointing at the girl with his finger, he thought that she was above level 50 and how could she participate? The girl bared her teeth and called him a shameless bastard because he liked the Yahello's necklace. The Chief River spread his arms and said that he did not understand what she was talking about because he sold them at auction for a good price. Greta stood with a sword in her hand saying that she would make a stake out of it. The guy began to mock, saying that he was afraid. The spectators looked at them and said that they apparently had old quarrels and this would be interesting. Pointing at him with her finger, she said that his insolence would end because she knew his secret. He asked to surprise him. With a serious face, she began to say that the wolf was not actually a pet, but used the sealing artifact to control it. Ian with a calm face asked what she was talking about. Haynes was shocked because this could become a sensation. The girl said that his wolf was very strong for a level 50 summoner. They looked at them. The guy continued that with such a magical artifact it is easier to win in the league as a beginner. The girl said that even in this game the rich get richer and the poor poorer. Gritting her teeth because she believed all this time, she irritated him. The spectators were talking and the main one asked if they really believed her. Louise pointed her finger at him and asked him to stop talking because she would ignore his wolf and finish him off. Sighing, he said, "Damn you, the match started in 5 seconds. Looking at her, he said that he would finish her off in 30 seconds. Berserker and Ian ran at her. Louise started shooting at them because she had foreseen the actions. The arrow flew straight at them. He moved away so that the arrow would not hit him because he knew about this powerful skill. Running faster, the girl began to think that the damage was small, but he apparently thought that he would escape from the homing arrow. A shield appeared in her hands, which was hit by an arrow. Louise smiled because it was good. Broken arrows lay on the floor. The homing arrow hit Ben. Only 1 unit of damage was inflicted. The girl was shocked by the damage and she did not hit. What the hell, pet? The main character smiled and said that this was his turtle protection. He was already near her, then asked her what he was going to do. The girl muttered and turned away. Ian smiled with all his teeth and looked at her. Near Louise was a wolf and the main character. She stood with a bow. His fist lit up with a bright flame. Behind him was Lou. She screamed and was pierced in the chest. The building had many windows. At that moment they said that the main character had won. Raising his hand up, he thought that it would be great if all the opponents were weaklings like that. Ian stood next to his pets. He made it to the semifinals. Looking at the screen, he said that all the previous matches were easy. He hoped that there would be a worthy opponent in the semifinals. A magician came out of the corridor, holding a stick. A small child came out of the shadows, wearing a hat. He walked past the main character, realizing that appearances are deceiving. Ian pointed to himself and introduced himself. The child sighed and closed his eyes. Touching his head with his hand, he said that apparently he finally got a strong opponent, but if he loses, he will be sad because he is the greatest wizard on the continent. His eyes became big. He smiled from ear to ear. Speaking to himself, he said that he will put an end to sins. Yan turned his head away and did not understand what he was talking about because it was the syndrome of an 8th grader. They stood opposite each other. The guy thought that he was a dark sorcerer while referring to the fact that he is a summoner. The boy pointed to himself with his finger and said that his name is Michael, and the one who will soon be gone should not introduce himself. The protagonist scratched his head and wondered if he was beaten. There were clouds in the sky, and the match was starting in 5 seconds. Skeletons appeared around. The child was casting a spell for his servants to bring victory. The skeletons had different guns, clothes, there weren't many of them. Their eyes were shining brightly, but the guy thought they were painted black. Ben bared his teeth, and the guy bit his lip. He understood that the guy had a hidden class, and that's why he could summon skeletons he hadn't seen before. Ian looked into the distance and didn't know what skills the opponent would use because he should have watched the Dark Sorcerer matches in advance. The spectators watched while the match was starting. The skeletons stood there until the boy gave the order to attack. The monsters ran at him with swords, shields, and helmets. Michael cast a spell while the protagonist was being attacked. He was slowed down by 20%. Moving away from the skeleton, he understood that he would not be able to finish the match quickly like the others, and in this case he would fight to the end. Lou ran while the boy asked him to run away. A bright lump of magic appeared in his hand. He ordered Biggie to make an ice wave. The pet screamed to make an ice wave. The wolf ran at the skeletons while his allies were behind. There was a blue aura near the skeletons. Also yellow lightning. The summoned skeletons received the paralysis effect and will be slowed down by 30%. The eye was glowing. He smiled and said that everything was fine. Michael smiled and a pentagram appeared near his finger. He understood that it would not be easy. Ian ruffled his feathers because he did not understand what it was. The boy pointed his finger at the main character from whom smoke was coming out because his luck had run out. Ian was alarmed because the Justice of Darkness is the basic skill of a dark sorcerer, who is very fast but can predict its trajectory by the hands of the caster. The boy smiled and said that it was not bad, but he felt sorry because he had to face such an opponent. The main character put his hand on the floor and understood that the 8th grader syndrome is incurable. The skeletons were moving towards him. His pupil became larger because now he had a chance. Biggie clenched his hand into a fist and began to perform the skill of a strong blow. The monster did not even touch the skeletons, which is what the child thought. The boy grinned and asked if it was real. Lou was standing behind Biggie and this was a real attack. The wolf moved towards the skeletons. His eyes were bright, his mouth was slightly open. He killed all the skeletons he saw. Michael did not understand what was happening. The heads of the monsters broke with a crack. The child threw their heads away from himself. Sweat broke out on his face, but he predicted this too. Taking a wand in his hands, he began to repress the dead. The wolf ran. While delivering a critical hit, Michael received 2,272 damage. Smiling, he understood that he had gotten it. Lou began to scream while he paused, then the skill of repression of the dead worked, which returned 276 damage, and the wolf himself received 6,270 damage. The main character began to bare his teeth and look at the red screen, because the wolf's maximum health was less than 8,000. There was a red aura near Lou because he received more damage. The main character put out his hand where the screen appeared. He began to try to return the wolf because at this rate he would die. Touching his hat, he understood that the pathetic wolf had great damage, but little health and no one could pass by his all-seeing eye. The guy had dark hair. He thought that he should have initially destroyed the skeletons because he did not expect that he would have to fight without his pet. Sighing, he began to understand that his opponent also received great damage and he had a chance. He also had his hand on his hat and also asked if he would allow him to predict his future actions, because with his brilliant mind it was easy. He also had a stick in his hands and decided to ask if he thought about losing a lot of health. Sighing, he called the skill of soul absorption. Stretching out his hand, he said that thanks to the skill, his health points were restored. With a smirk on his face, he asked how he was going to defeat him without a wolf. Sweat began to appear on his face, because if he did not act carefully, he would lose. His face was dissatisfied because he was thinking about what to do. Opening their mouths, they said that this was the greatest battle and their fight was breathtaking. His hand was in a fist and he decided to ask who she thought would win the match. Louise smiled because she was not sure and it was too early to talk about the outcome of the match. Turning towards the sound, he thought about what was going on. There were a lot of people and they were shouting that it was impossible. Biggie appeared near the main character because he had just recalled his pets. Looking at the arena, they realized that this was not the only pet he had, but it was the strongest. His face was pleased and a blue shield appeared on his hand. The spectators were screaming very loudly because they did not understand what was happening. The child was in shock because he did not understand how he had recalled his pets. Putting his hand to his head, he thought that apparently the opponent realized his weakness and decided to give in, deciding to accept his concessions. Jan sighed and did not understand what he was talking about. Pointing a finger at him, he said that if he continued to talk nonsense, he would teach him a lesson. Michael replied that he was going to let him give in. Starting to bare his teeth, he could not come to terms with the fact that he was called a scoundrel, while Jan understood that he had provoked him. Ben was on his shoulder. He looked at him. The turtle flew away with a serious face. He looked at the turtle in bewilderment. With sweat on his face, he asked if he had any more pets. The protagonist shed tears because he thought that Ben was helping him for the sake of meatballs, but he stood up bravely to protect him. Putting his staff to the turtle, he decided to get rid of the turtle. The wand glowed with dark justice. Ben stood while there was an aura near him. The dark justice skill was applied to him. A barrier formed near the turtle. She had a serious face, and the guy was looking at her. Michael raised his staff and told his skeletons to go forward. Ben was near the opponents, and the child said that he would take care of her later. The turtle paid attention to the words because Michael decided to kill the bastard first. The skeletons ran at the protagonist because the child said so. For Ian, this was predictable. He began to dodge his opponents. The child, with a smirk on his face, asked what he wanted to achieve by running away from him. Ben's eyes lit up. 2 copies of the protagonist appeared near Michael. It was a spatial distortion. Looking back with a puzzled face, he saw him. Suddenly, Jan's hand was near his back. Michael dropped his staff and fell, screaming at such an event. Squinting his eyes on the ground, he said that he was fine. Jan stood next to him, looking with an evil smile. His hand was near the child's face while he was screaming. Giving him a flick, Michael began to cry. His mouth was open and his eyes were wide because he fell from the arena. The spectators screamed at the top of their lungs because Michael was eliminated according to the rules. Raising his hand, the man said that the summoner had won. The girl and the guy were delighted because it felt like he was just playing with him. His face was dissatisfied because Jan won even without the summoned wolf artifact. Turning his head, he thought that he was tired of the artifact topic. Michael cried on the ground, saying that it was his victory. The main character asked him not to cry because he looked even more pitiful. The child began to cry even more and asked to forget what happened. It was night. Some windows in the building were lit up. People were sitting at the computers. One of the girls leaned back in her chair. Sighing, she asked if it was the newbie league again. Closing one eye, she said that she had lost count, and why were they rushing to watch the league that hadn't ended yet? Agatha replied that the forums were going crazy. Putting her hand to her lips, she asked in bewilderment what was going on there. The main character had his pet standing next to him, as everyone had expected. Jack entered the arena. They called him the best killer. He beat his opponents, and to think that he had thought so high with the help of basic killer skills. The protagonist understood that it would be very difficult. His thoughts were disturbed because he was not greeted. Having extended his hands and introduced himself, he offered to put on a great show. Jack looked with a serious face because the final match of the Champions League would soon begin. The spectators shouted that these were the best killers. Having stretched, they were told that the match would begin in 5 seconds. Having looked at his opponent, he understood that this was not the best opponent for him. His hands turned blue. Also, if he did not find a way to cope with this invisibility skill, then he would not have a chance. There was a purple aura near the guy. He needed to strengthen his senses and dodge the first attacks with the help of reflexes. Ian's hand turned yellow, and the match began. He had to defeat him before he activated invisibility. His opponent was determined. Having extended a knife with his hand, he looked at him. They looked at each other until Ian understood why he did not use the invisibility skill. His pets were standing near the guy. While Jack was swinging his gun, he assumed that maybe he was saving it because of the long reload of the skill. He swung at the main character while he was looking at him with an uncomprehending face. A smile appeared on his face because, considering his caution, he probably considers him his equal. He ran at Ian while the same aura was near him. The wolf screamed while the guy screamed to disperse. Looking at Biggie, he told him to act now. He looked at him again and screamed again. An ice wave appeared near his pet. An ice storm was near the enemy. He was also standing with a dagger in his hands. His eyes became larger. There was still an ice aura nearby. In his hands was a dark purple aura. He used a shadow jump to bounce off the ice. Leaning slightly, he disappeared. Biggie was behind Jack. Sweat ran down his face because he realized that the enemy had a hidden class associated with shadows. Jakey and Lou were near Ian because that was not all. His hand turned yellow. His smile became wider. The wolf closed his eyes while the main character called him. Lou was worried, and this did not work. The spectators were screaming. It was heard even in the city. Putting his hand on the ground while the enemy was trying to approach, he understood that he could not dodge in the air. After all, any skill has a recharge time. Having dodged the attack, Ian did not understand how he did it. In his hands was still the same dagger. How suddenly, from the hand flew many daggers towards the main character. Looking at this, he began to understand that he must have been mistaken. A ball appeared in his hand because the enemy knew that this was not an obstacle. Jake's eyes lit up. He looked at Ian. The knives became shadowy. He was in shock. Shadows appeared near him, but he tried to defend himself with a serious face. Opening his mouth, he began to receive critical damage from the knives, eventually receiving 4,560 units of damage. The knives cut him while he was surprised by the damage. Jake looked at him with contempt. Opening his mouth, he wondered where such power came from. Lu opened his mouth and began to scream. Together, they advanced on the enemy. Transparent balls appeared near the wolf. Jake was near him. The balls were everywhere. Having started to fight, they were calm. At this time he received 1,795 units of damage. Jake was beaten while he screamed. At this moment he received damage and also slowed down by 30%. The main character still had a ball in his hands. He thought that losing was not in his repertoire. Clenching his hand into a fist, he began to rejoice that the paralysis worked. The guy with gray hair began to think. Ian had balls in both hands because he decided to use himself as bait so that Lu could hit. Moving towards him, he took damage, but the enemy would have received it many times over. Looking at him, he thought that killers have no more lives than dark sorcerers. Jake's face was in the shadows. Having struck him, he dodged. The guy looked puzzled because it was invisibility. The protagonist looked everywhere to understand where he was. Turning back, he understood everything. Jake was behind. The guy had sweat on his face. Starting to turn around, he decided to hit him with balls. Having hit him in the chest with his hand, he lost 1,217 units of health. Jake closed one eye because he was hit. In his hands was a dagger which he decided to pick up. He hit the protagonist with his hand. The dagger that was there gave critical damage to Ben, who lost 27 units of health. In front of the enemy was Ian, who was holding his pet and praising him. Having pushed him away, he swung his hand. Having missed, he was hit while Ben watched it in fear. Ian was hit, which caused him to receive critical damage and also bleeding. Opening the screen, he performed the first aid skill. His wounds began to heal, restoring 843 units of health. Jake looked at him because he was excellent at using his skills. Beads of sweat ran down his face because he had too little health to turn the fight in his favor. Having run, he decided not to give up. The eye was black and concentrated because he decided to put the maximum into the last attack. Squinting, he continued. Jake looked at him with a smile on his face. They were standing in front of each other, magic in their hands, a pet standing behind them. The wolf was also standing behind and watching. He decided to stomp his foot, running with all his might. Having run near the enemy, he struck. Suddenly, Jake was surprised because behind him was a wolf. His eyes were glowing. Opening his mouth, he began to growl at the top of his lungs. Lu bit his shoulder, dealing critical damage. Jake looked at his wound while taking 630 damage per second. Two claws appeared behind him, which were near his shoulder. The protagonist smiled because that's what he needed. Ian stood behind the wolf while Jake stood opposite them. If he dragged out time, there wouldn't be much health left. His eyes turned purple. He was sure that he could block his shadow attacks. Running towards each other, the enemy threw a dagger. Concentrated, he understood that he needed to hold out for a couple of seconds and then Jake would receive all the remaining damage from bleeding and the last attack would decide everything. Swinging, daggers flew out of his hands. It was a shadow throw of blades. There were many of them, flying from all sides. The protagonist began to dodge them. His eyes turned bright yellow. His mouth opened and he shouted for Lu and Biggie to run to attack. They began to act, but Jake tried to dodge. Jumping up, he began to use the shadow throw of blades. Near his face was a dagger. His hand glowed with a purple aura. The protagonist paused and did not understand what it was. Daggers were moving towards his feet. The guy was struck by the attack of the shadow throw of blades. He lost because his health fell below 5%. Taking hold of his head, he realized that he had finally reached it. Fireworks appeared above the building. People were shouting in victory. Raising their hands, they looked at the fireworks. Sighing, he began to think about why he lost. In front of him stood the winner, Jake. They decided to shake hands while the spectators praised the winner. Looking at the chests, he realized that he took second place. Sighing, he said that he fell into the trap of his opponent. Remembering the battle, he realized that he did not know him and should not have fought him head-on because he counted on his pets. Looking at the screen, he realized that after a fight there is no waving fists and decided to win next time. Continuing to look at the screens, he decided to see what he received. Smiling, he said, "Opening chests is always exciting." Waving his hand between the awards, he thought about which one to open first. Looking at them, he decided to open the chest with jewelry. He pressed the open button. He received a dazzling summoner ring, heroic by class. Smiling, he said that additional regeneration of spirit mana is very good. He remembered how magic appeared in his hand because his spirit mana was not enough for the power surge. Putting his hand on the second chest, he decided to see what was there. In the chest was a dazzling summoner longbow. It also had a heroic class and when dealing critical damage to an enemy, it restored 3 units of spirit mana. Looking at the screen, he realized that the item was better than expected, but there was one problem. Fantasizing about what he would do with a bow, he realized that he would not be able to use the communication skill, he would lose the enhanced critical strike of the pet and the leadership buffs that the gloves give. Taking his chin, he began to think that the regeneration of spirit mana and the reduction in the recovery time of skills were very tempting. He scrolled through the screen, deciding to use the bow, but to leave the gloves in reserve. A bow appeared in his hands, and now if there was a big hunt, it would be easier to level up, since the recharge time of skills was greatly reduced. Holding the bow in his hands, he decided to check what Lu was capable of. Smiling at him, they increased his training to an average level of 8, and the potential of 50. Near him was a dragon and a wolf, because he understood that if he got a new strong pet, he would be able to train it well. He began to think what he had forgotten. Screaming, he remembered that there was an argument. He had to reach level 93 before the end of the holidays. The man and the boy were talking on the phone. He asked if he wanted to level up before the end of the semester, and if he won, he would give him the best grade in all subjects. Thinking about it, he realized that there was a month and 10 days left until the start of the semester. Counting on his fingers, he realized that there were 50 days left in total. Crying and screaming, he realized that he was finished. The sun was shining, they were fighting in the mountains. A wolf with red eyes was fighting a bear. Approaching him, he realized that he had reached level 62. Making a fist with his hands and smiling, he praised himself. Pulling himself up, he realized that he had done it quickly, but he needed to speed up. Looking at the leveling on the screen, he said that the class skill he received at level 60 made hunting faster. Explosive potential could only be used on pets and also improved combat skills. Taking his chin with one hand, he realized that increasing the potential doubled the pet's combat abilities. Ben was at level 61, Lu at 63, and Biggie at 64. Starting to look for a more difficult place, he looked into the distance, thinking. He decided to go to the Forkle mountain range and also do the B-class quest that he received. Grandpa was standing with a staff in his hands. He said that those who passed the test could receive a reward along with a mission that could not be refused. He had a feather in his hands. He continued to say that in any case, if you bring the soul stone to the spatial mage, he will find a way to return the battle dragon in some other way. Ben was sitting on his shoulder. He decided to go to the spatial mage tower as soon as he got to level 70. Ian was sitting on the wolf. He asked him to go to the Forkle mountain range. In the house, someone asked if the cereal was over. Looking at the package, he realized that he had already finished it. Taking the phone in his hands, he decided to order food. While ordering, I decided to look at the information about the monsters around the Forkle mountain range. There was fire in the dungeon. There was a lava witch. She attacked with constant fire damage in all directions and hit the area. She was all black, her eyes were shining brightly with fire. The guy was surprised because her innate ability was an area attack. The guy was standing next to her because many of her parameters were unknown. There was a photo of her on the laptop because this was the skill of the Kingdom of Fire. His face became angry because he wanted her. Closing his eyes, he realized that she was rare. There was a smile on his face. Before that, he developed fighters of the normal class, so he wanted to capture a rare class and develop it. Putting his hands on each other, he thought how much time it would take. Looking at the laptop, he realized that if he grabbed her, the pumping speed would increase at least twice. Closing the laptop, he decided that this information was enough and he needed to eat and sit down in the game again. Scratching his head on the wolf, he realized that he had not been here for a long time, but spent a lot of time. Poking at the screen, he realized that the robber's lair was nearby. Looking at the mountains, he told himself that this was a good place to hunt and the monsters should be about level 68. They stood near the edge of the mountain, then asked Lu to go to another place. Jumping off the wolf, he began to look around, because this gorge was wider than he remembered, but the plan had to work. In the mountains, he called Biggie. An ice pet appeared near him, whom he asked to move the boulders. Biggie took the stone, starting to move it in the other direction. The guy walked away from him and began to say that he was worried about not moving them and asked the pet to sit here. A little lower were the guards. He asked if the wolf saw them. The wolf barked, and Ian asked to sneak up on them and then wait for a signal. The wolf ran in their direction. The main character also ran, but in the other direction. He began to go down the mountain. Looking to the right, he decided to use arrows. Ian was going down the cliff. He thought seriously about using arrows this time. A bow appeared in his hand. His eyes were shining brightly. The protagonist and Lu walked down the cliff. He pulled the arrow onto the bowstring and noted that now that he had the bow in his hands, the power surge was applied to the arrows, and it also had a paralysis effect, which was very convenient. The guards were taken aback by what he saw. Yang took aim, thinking that he needed to hit them right now and not give them the opportunity to counterattack. After firing the arrow, the protagonist said that this was the perfect moment. The shot hit the guard in the head. Looking at the wounded warrior, Yang received messages that the mountain bandit sentry was receiving the paralysis effect. He was slowed down by 30% and received 50% more damage from electricity attacks, The recovery time of the power surge skill was reduced. The protagonist called out to Lu with a satisfied look. The wolf rushed at the second guard. A grin appeared on Yong's face. Lu grabbed the warrior's shoulder. The guard stood on the tower, dumbfounded, shouting that they were under attack. He took off his mask and shouted that everyone should run to the gate. The warrior started ringing the bell, shouting that they were under attack. The protagonist looked at the wolf and ordered him to come to him. A cry was heard from the settlement that they needed to prepare for defense. Watching the warriors, Ian thought that this was great and they took the bait. A crowd of guards rushed at him, saying that this fool was running away. The protagonist looked at the sky. He ran next to Lu. The guards were trying to catch up with him. Ian suddenly stopped and assumed that all the warriors were there. He called Lu to him with a satisfied look. The protagonist turned his attention to Biggie, who was hiding behind a rock. Jakey was circling around Ian. Ben was sitting on his shoulder. The protagonist watched them and asked if they wanted to do something cool too. He asked Jakey and Ben to do it another time with a smile on his face because there was always a chance. Ian looked at the warriors, who loudly asked who dared to challenge them, the Forkle Mountain Bandits. Looking back, the protagonist clarified if they were trying to be tough and then asked Biggie to jump. The golem jumped off the cliff. It was flying towards the bandits. Biggie's face was furious. Biggie dealt a powerful blow to the ground, which crushed all the warriors. Looking at the opponents who flew to the sides, Ian received a notification that the pet Biggie dealt more than 2,000 damage to the enemy Forkle Mountain Bandit, after which he noted that therefore it is necessary to think with your head. Grinning, the protagonist read that Biggie received about 3,000 damage due to falling from the cliff, after which he stated that this makes the ambush useless, but there is nothing to worry about. Biggie sent an ice wave at the enemies. The guards tried to escape from the powerful magic attack. The bandit was shocked. He cried out with a tearful look that the guys were idiots, because first they needed to kill the fat golem. The man started to run away from Biggie and asked why he was rushing at him. Lu rushed into battle. He ran past the bandits and pushed them aside. Projections appeared in front of Ian, which said that Lu's pet had dealt a critical hit to the enemy Forkle Mountain Bandit, and they would receive 1,000 damage per second for 10 seconds from the bleeding effect. Smiling, Ian noted that even the damage numbers from bleeding were more than 3 digits. They died 5 seconds after Lu bit them, which was very good. The surprised protagonist read that Forkle Mountain Bandit received the dazzling mark effect. He saw red marks above the heads of the opponents. Ian grabbed the bow and shouted that it was 5 seconds of reload time and it was time for him to light it. The dumbfounded warriors shouted that they needed to run. The protagonist asked with a serious expression if there had always been so few of them, noting that before it seemed to him that there were much more bandits there. The man stood in front of the bandit. He swung the axe. He cut the bandit down and asked if he knew who he was talking to. Looking at the man, the soldiers shouted that it was the chieftain. Looking at the muscular man, Ian wondered where this one was from and if these were bandit sorcerers, whose average level was 70. The chieftain's eyes were shining brightly. Frowning, the protagonist emphasized the fact that it was no wonder that everything was going too smoothly, but he was not going to run away from them. Ian stood in front of the man. He took the bow in his hand. Looking at the warrior, the protagonist shouted that he needed to deal with him first. The sorcerers behind the leader created magical barriers. The sorcerers used a joint spell. Streams of flame flew out from the magic circles. Biggie blocked the protagonist from the streams of fire. Looking at the shocked Biggie, Ian said that it was unlucky that these sorcerers wielded fire. Turning around, the protagonist asked if he should retreat because Biggie would not survive this. Looking at how the golem blocked the magical projectiles, Ian reasoned that there was no way out now. Biggie would die there. He would have to fight without him for almost a whole week. He needed to recall him before he died. The protagonist saw with a smile on his face that the golem had almost reached the next level. Lu rushed into battle while Ian said that the wolf should attack those who were hit by the arrow, and the golem should move back a little. The protagonist concentrated on the enemies. He noticed how the sorcerers created a sphere of fire. Biggie hid behind a rock, and Ian wondered in his mind if this was an improved fire skill, adding that if they hit Biggie before he leveled up, he would be finished. The protagonist looked at the mage and shouted for Lu to kill him first. The sorcerers released a fireball. Ian looked at the burning golem and noted that the pet Biggie was taking damage from the ability Fire Burst used by the rogue sorcerer of Mount Forkle. The pet would lose more than 700 units of health per second. Enraged, Lu attacked the mages. A blue aura enveloped the golem, after which the protagonist saw a message saying that Biggie had reached level 65. Smiling, Ian exclaimed that this was great. Biggie's health had fully recovered and it was time to deal with the rest. Standing behind the golem, the protagonist wondered why it continued to glow. A powerful stream of energy created an earthquake. Taken aback, Ian asked if Biggie was evolving. The monster's eyes were glowing brightly. A powerful explosion was heard. The golem's body began to transform. Biggie became even larger and armor appeared on his body, after which a message popped up that Ice Golem Biggie had evolved into Abyss Golem. The joyful protagonist exclaimed that this was something familiar, after which he asked if it meant that monsters from the deep island received the prefix Abyss, reaching a unique class, noting that Ben was also an Abyss turtle. Ian began to cry with joy when he saw that Biggie had even improved his training skill, which was growing at a snail's pace. The enraged chieftain shouted loudly that they needed to attack, and the protagonist noted that they didn't even let him check the status window. Young suddenly frowned. The golem's fist began to glow brightly. It dealt a powerful blow. It killed the warriors in one blow. The protagonist was puzzled by this. Biggie concentrated streams of energy in his hand. The energy turned purple. Young, dumbfounded, examined the mana and asked what it was. A powerful surge of energy threw the warriors aside. The protagonist watched him and shouted that it was cool. His evolutionary form was much better than he expected, and then wondered if the Abyss Golem was really that strong. Yang, angry, shouted that it was time for them to finish. The night sky enveloped the canyon. The protagonist sat down on the ground and stated that he was tired, but still happy that Biggie had evolved. He looked at the golem and guessed that it was due to the level up, and then asked if level 65 was a condition for evolution. Looking at Biggie's stats, Ian noticed that Lou evolved at level 20. He added with a sad expression that it was a pity that he could no longer evolve, while Lou retained the ability to evolve even after evolving once. Shaking his head, the protagonist said that it was still very cool. Biggie had skipped the rare class and became unique, and he also had incredible defense. Ian said with a satisfied face that the difference between the classes was especially noticeable when compared to Lou, although the wolf still had much higher attack power and agility. Touching the projection with his hand, the protagonist noted that he would look at the innate abilities. The protagonist read the information about the ability Bottomless Abyss, that Biggie throws his hands forward and releases a powerful shockwave in a cone-shaped area at a distance of 20 meters. After the shockwave, an abyssal vortex appears for 10 seconds, sucking in all enemies in the area of effect. Enemies hit by the vortex will take damage equal to 35% of the pet's attack parameter every half a second. At the end of the action, the vortex will explode, dealing damage equal to 150% of the pet's defense parameter, after which Ian said that it does not recover that long and will be useful. The protagonist learned the ability Abyssal Defense, which increases the defense parameter proportionally to the lost health. When the health level falls below 10%, the pet receives a shield for 10 seconds equal to 50% of the pet's maximum health. Ian seriously noted that this Abyssal Defense is also good. He shook the dust off his shoulder and said that he learned enough and rested. So, the protagonist smirked and asked why he didn't search the mountain bandit camp. The night sky enveloped the building. Rena was standing behind the kitchen stove. She was holding a pie in her hands and announced that it was ready. Standing in front of the table, she shouted that it was wonderful and the pies looked absolutely delicious. Holding her chin, Rena suggested that Ian had run out of meatballs and she would have to make them next time. She wondered with an embarrassed look what the protagonist was planning. A powerful explosion echoed through the mountainous area. Biggie was throwing boulders at the warriors. Ian and his pets were killing the guards who were screaming and asking for help. Sighing, the protagonist noted that he needed to rest and heal. In any case, he needed to find something. Ben approached him. Ian held a meatball to him. He asked with a satisfied look if Ben knew that this was his last meatball. He haughtily emphasized the fact that he would have to ask Rena to make something even tastier the next time they met. Touching the projection, Ian stated that the most important thing was to reach level 70. Barry wrote him a message asking how he was doing. They discussed in the correspondence that the protagonist was finishing unfinished quests. He preferably needed to reach level 93 before the start of school. Displeased, Ian asked why Barry was writing to him if he was terribly busy. The protagonist looked at Ben and asked if he was asking why Ian was wasting his time there if he was terribly busy. The protagonist looked away. The protagonist took out his bow. He began to aim and stated that this was why he was wasting his time there. A whirlwind of wind surrounded the arrow. It flew past the trees. Smiling, Ian noted that he had hit the target. The bird screamed loudly. It jumped up and flapped its wings. The bird's eyes were shining brightly. It was flapping its wings, creating gusts of wind. Looking at it, Ian called it Clofia. The protagonist stood over the unfortunate bird and said that it was a great source of usefulness. Blue mana sealed the bird. Ian looked at the characteristics of Clofia, level 72. Touching the screen with his finger, the protagonist said that as he expected, thanks to its high agility, he would be able to greatly increase his agility with the possession skill. Standing in the thick of the forest, Ian said that this thing requires a lot of leadership, and he did not have much of it. He would need to quickly get rid of it and increase his leadership. He calmly said that he would return to hunting. A crowd of warriors stood in the middle section of the Forkle Mountains. The man frowned. His gaze fell on Ian and his monsters. Biggie concentrated dark mana in his hand, using Bottomless Abyss. He released a cloud of mana at the enemies. The dumbfounded warriors began to be sucked into the small black hole. Light energy emanated from the protagonist's hands, while he reasoned that during the action of the bottomless abyss, the effect of the bracers becomes really useful. Yang released a discharge of energy and noted that with them, he can also use 2 electric spheres at once. Electric energy struck the warriors. Standing in front of the cloud, the protagonist emphasized the fact that mass grinding is the most enjoyable part of hunting. Smiling, the protagonist said that it was time to return to the bow because long-range attacks are better suited for mass grinding. He had a smirk on his face. Standing behind Lu, Yang thought about finding him. The man was standing in front of the stairs. Pointing his finger, the leader of the bandits asked if he was the one who attacked them. Looking at the leader who had a smile on his face, the protagonist wondered if he was level 80, adding that when he was there before the reset, he was definitely level 75 or so, not to mention that he had changed his weapon to a crossbow. The leader had a crossbow in his hands. Ian watched it closely and thought that if necessary, he could probably escape thanks to the increased agility from owning Clothia, but he didn't know what to do now. Clutching the bow in his hand, the protagonist came to the conclusion that he should be able to deal with it. The enemies with a long-range attack had less health, so if he dealt with it quickly, everything would work out. Frowning, Ian called Biggie. He and the golem prepared to attack. Lu jumped over their shots because the protagonist asked him to deal with the leader. A powerful stream of energy moved towards the enemies. The leader was puzzled by what he saw. He cried out in a furious tone that they had dared to underestimate him. Ian noticed the bandit leader put up a magical barrier in front of him, and then noticed that he had an area of effect aura. Usually only tank bosses had such skills. His aura reflected Biggie's attack. Frowning, Ian thought that he needed to kill the bandit leader as soon as possible. Lu ran along the roof while the protagonist cast various spells. An enraged wolf rushed into battle. His face was furious. The warriors ran towards him. The wolf was heading towards the crowd of warriors. A powerful blow was heard. The bandits were shocked. Lu began to bite them. The bandit leader watched the fight. He was shocked by what he saw. The man aimed his crossbow at the wolf. The protagonist shot him and screamed that the leader couldn't do it that easily. The arrow grazed the leader's shoulder. The wolf jumped towards him with lightning speed. The stunned man screamed that it was a stupid mongrel. Lu hit the bandit leader with his paw. It hit the man's shoulder, after which Ian read that the wolf dealt a critical hit to the enemy bandit leader of the Middle Forkle Mountains. He lost a huge amount of health. Thanks to the critical hit, the bandit leader will receive increased damage for 5 seconds. The protagonist cried out with a satisfied look that he took off half of his health with just 2 hits. There was a crazy grin on the leader's face. He waved his hand. Lu flew back from the powerful blow. Looking at the projections, a dumbfounded Ian said that one single blow dealt almost 6,000 damage. And this is not even an arrow hit, even considering that Lu's defense is lowered due to Berserk. This is simply absurd. The puzzled protagonist wondered if that buff really affected his attack stat that much. Biggie was standing behind Ian, who asked to throw him there. The protagonist took out a bow from his inventory and remarked that he knew it was dangerous, but it was still worth doing. The bandit leader was preparing to shoot with a crossbow. They aimed the arrows at each other. Smirking, Ian declared that he would get him. Red and blue energy flew past each other. The red mana reached the protagonist's back. The protagonist's shot pierced the bandit's chest. Ian stopped, looking satisfied. Frowning, the protagonist supposed that it was a little thoughtless, but definitely worth it. A dark cloud of mana was aimed at the bandit leader. Biggie was standing next to Ian. The dark energy flew at an incredible speed. The bandit was shocked. A powerful blow was heard. Lu ran across the battlefield. The bandit was stunned by the attack. Enraged, Ian said that this was the end. He and Lu dealt the last blows to the man. A loud scream was heard in the area. A huge amount of energy was emanating from the bandit. The protagonist stood in front of the chest and said that he had gained a lot of experience. He hadn't expected anything else from the boss, and he wouldn't let the loot go. Lu suddenly started barking. Ian turned his attention to the guards who were shouting that this bastard had finished off their boss and needed to be killed. The protagonist, with a smile on his face, suggested that if they fought with their current amount of health, they wouldn't leave alive. He shouldn't overestimate himself. Clothia was flying next to Ian. Gusts of wind surrounded the protagonist. He flew into the sky, saying that he was lighter than a feather. Flying away from the bandits, Ian said goodbye to them. The bandits were upset by this. The protagonist looked at the dumbfounded Lu and Biggie and then said that he would call them off. Sunlight enveloped the rock. The protagonist, with a smile on his face, noted that he hadn't reached level 70 yet, but had already gained a lot. He ran between the rocks saying that he needed to contact Rena and get food for the pets. The castle was illuminated by the sun. We were transported to the Mulan auction house, near which there were many passers-by. Ian appeared there. Looking around, the protagonist noticed that Rena said that she would be somewhere there. Pointing his finger at the guy, Ian asked how he was doing, adding that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The embarrassed protagonist turned his gaze to Rena, who said that she hadn't seen him in the game for a long time. Standing in front of her, the protagonist answered that it was true. Closing her eyes, Rina said that she was busy with admission and had no time to play. Because of this, she couldn't even watch his tournament matches. Holding the back of his head, Ian said that everything was fine. It's good that she wasn't there. He probably would have been too busy even if she had come. Besides, he didn't manage to win. She stood in front of the protagonist and said that taking second place was already cool. The guy followed them and thought that he felt like a third wheel. The protagonist asked with a satisfied look if everyone in the guild was now above level 95. Holding his head, the guy replied that Fjallin was now above level 100. Puzzled, Ian emphasized the fact that the level of the top players back then was probably already above level 120. He needed to work harder. Looking at the protagonist, the guy said that it took a lot of time and effort. Their starting location for the guild was large, so it was not easy to cope with all the monsters there. It would be even better if Ian was there. Pointing his finger, the protagonist asked to wait a little longer because he was already level 69. The guy with a slight smile on his face asked if the protagonist was sleeping at all. Rina asked him to not overdo it with a satisfied expression, to which he replied that he had his reasons. Turning around, Rina asked to see his new friend who liked her meatballs, to which Ian clarified if she meant Ben. Raising his hand, the protagonist called Ben. A small turtle appeared on the ground. Rina, embarrassed, declared that he was very cute. She sat on his knee and greeted Ben. She was shocked. An angry Ben was kicking. Rina, with tears in her eyes, assumed that he did not like her. Sighing, the protagonist asked if Rina had anything similar to meatballs with her, to which Rina said that there must have been something left over from when she was grinding his skill level. She held the meatball in her hands and told him that it was an improved recipe. Rina gave the meatball to Ben. The turtle was delighted with the taste. She hugged Ben and assumed that he was happy. Watching them, Ian wondered why Ben always acted like this if everything always ended like this. Holding out his hand, the protagonist asked Rina not to give him meat anymore because it would spoil him. Ian took the box from her and said that if she gave them to him, he would give them to Ben when he was hungry, to which he replied that Rina was sure he was treating him well. He looked at the turtle with an angry look. The guy looked at the protagonist and asked why he didn't give him another one, after which Ian said that he couldn't do that because after this one he would be given more. Holding out his hand, the protagonist turned to Ben. He stroked Ben and told him that on the northern continent there was another turtle and they said that he was the coolest turtle in the world. The guys listened as the angry protagonist said that this pissed him off. Frowning, Ian noted that it annoyed him because, as far as he knew, there was no one cooler and more handsome than his Ben. The tearful protagonist suggested that the turtle got his title because he had gotten too fat. The protagonist petted Ben and added that this is why he cannot give him many meatballs. Looking around the city, the protagonist asked for a little patience, noting that he will make him the most handsome turtle in the universe. Ian arrived in a desert area. Sitting on Lu, the protagonist said that he will probably soon be quite far from Mount Forkle. Wiping sweat from his face, the protagonist said that judging by the heat, he is approaching a flaming plateau. Standing at the cliff, Ian noted that it is unlikely that this lava witch will like Rina's meatballs. This place is really inhospitable. But he has no other choice. He fought with a scorpion and said that he needed to level up and it didn't matter how, he urgently needed level 90. The scorpion's tail was torn off. Lu began to gnaw on it. They arrived at the dungeon of the burning plateau and stood in front of the entrance. Ian's gaze fell on a lit torch. Entering the dungeon, the protagonist emphasized the fact that it was even hotter there. He looked at the spirits and assumed that it was because of these lava spawns. Examining the monsters, Ian looked at their levels. The protagonist noticed a girl and noted that she was a lava witch. Taking a bow in his hand, the protagonist said that he should not underestimate her guards. They can be very dangerous if they attack 10 at once. If he wants to get the lava witch, he needs to get to the very bottom floor as soon as possible, because the number of rare monsters increases with the depth of the dungeon. While looking at the demons, Ian stated that he would like to meet a monster of unique rank or higher. Biggie prepared for battle while the protagonist said that he should follow him and could aggro all the lava spawns if he went ahead, so he should be careful. The protagonist looked at the wolf and asked to kill the one the arrow hit. Ian looked around. He prepared to shoot. The protagonist looked at his rival and said that if he wanted to get the lava witch, he needed to get to the lowest floor as quickly as possible. He imagined the girl walking and thought that the number of rare monsters increases with the depth of the dungeon. He would like to meet a monster of unique rank and higher. Looking at Biggie, Ian told him to follow him, but to be careful, he could aggro all the lava spawns if he went forward. The guy looked at the running wolf and ordered him to be ready. When he shot, the pet should kill whoever it hits. The protagonist pulled his bow with a smile and activated the power surge. The arrow quickly flew forward. The projectile hit the lava witch. The protagonist stood behind the running companions and activated the explosive potential. Lu growled furiously. He slapped his paws at the rival. Clenching his fist, Ian said that this is great. The guy stood among the pets and told them to go to the lowest floor. He was climbing the stairs with columns. The protagonist looked ahead in surprise and decided that it was strange. The protagonist looked at the enemies, thinking that the color of most of the monsters had changed. He had seen some on the 5th floor, but there were many more of them here. Looking at the smiling corrupted lava witch, the guy thought that she was probably for some quest. Ian ran away from her in the room and said that he would not touch her for now. He looked away in surprise and asked what the hell was that. The protagonist stood in front of the doors and said that he thought that there were only 10 floors. Opening the door a little, the protagonist said that he should take a look. A lava flow appeared in front of him. Ian stood with his pets on the cliff in front of the lava. Frowning, he clarified what it was called. Was it a lava fall? There were reports that he was the first to discover the source of the lava, a squall of furious heat. His affinity with fire-type monsters would not fall below 30. Turning to Lou, the guy said that he had never heard of such a thing. Was he really the first to discover this place? He watched the lava splash and asked what it was. Steve rose from the lava in front of the guy and said that someone worthy came here. Covering one eye, Ian wondered if this was a quest. It seemed like he would not attack right away. The protagonist introduced the pets and thought that it must be a hidden area that only the summoner can enter, which is why he was the first to get here. The monster approached the guy and said that he was the guardian of the lava source. The protagonist looked at him seriously and introduced himself. Steve stood in the lava and said that it was time to get down to business and asked if he could clear the lava source and deal with the problem. Frowning, Ian thought about the fact that he knew it was a hidden quest. In that case, he had no reason to refuse and replied that he would be happy to help in any way he could. The guard looked at him and said that he was pleased to hear that. Standing near the cliff, he said that the guy first had to do something. The protagonist looked at him in shock and clarified what he had said. Steve looked down and asked to bring him at least 20 corrupted lava witches. The protagonist looked at him in confusion and asked what he wanted. The guy looked at the window with information about the quest and thought about 42,000 experience for each witch. Gritting his teeth, he wondered if this was really as much as they give for killing 12 regular lava witches. It was incredible. The guard stood in front of the guy and asked if he could do it, because the more witches he could catch in this time, the better. Looking at the floating crystal, he asked to take this binding stone. Ian looked at the object seriously and wondered if this was really the binding stone. Smirking, he replied that he would do it. There was no need to worry. The protagonist sadly extended his finger to the stone and asked if it was really only 3 hours. Steve looked at the guy happily and said that he believed in him. The wolf growled furiously and the system reported that there were 2 hours left. Half an hour later, Ian shot the witch. Dark energy struck the rivals. The guard clenched his fist and said that time was almost up. The protagonist ran towards him along the cliff and asked him to wait. Steve stood in front of the guy and said that he was just in time, specifying how many witches he was able to catch. Ian, out of breath, extended the stone and replied that he had collected 31 witches for him in total. The guard looked at the stone in surprise and said that it was incredible, grandiose, really incredible. He underestimated him and asked for forgiveness. The protagonist smiled, thinking about the fact that he had more than 1 million experience. He would hardly have earned so much in half a day, and here he received it in just 3 hours, and asked if he needed to do anything else. Steve smiled and replied that there was much more. The protagonist looked at him with fear and thought that for some reason he had a bad feeling about this. Meanwhile, the sun was shining in the city. Celias was sitting in the office at the table in front of Hank and calling him. He sat in the chair and asked if he had heard of the summoner prophet. Gritting his teeth, the man replied that he had not, but if His Majesty thought that he was too slow, he could go and meet him in person. Celias raised his hand and said that there was no need for that. Their scientists had been struggling with this for a long time, so he did not expect him to cope with it in just a month. Frowning, he noted that there were only 4 months left until the national anniversary. His Majesty introduced the griffin and said that if it appeared on the day of the holiday, it would really impress the people. Taking a cup and saucer, Celias said that he would wait 2 more months. The man put his hand to his face and said that if he didn't hear from him, he wanted Hank to find him. The protagonist climbed the mountain and asked what the hell this was. He turned around and asked when this quest would end. He had been doing it for over a day. Frowning, Ian said that if he was disappointed with the reward, he would be furious and didn't care if he was a lava guard or anything. He would smash everything to hell. The guy hit the rock with an ice pick and said that because of this, he couldn't even hunt. He looked at the bag with crimson moss. The protagonist furiously hit the ice pick and said that he would smash everything. Notifications appeared that he had successfully collected the crimson moss root and completed the quest. Trying to catch his breath, the guy begged to say that this was it. The protagonist looked at the mountains and screamed that he needed to hurry up and turn in this quest. He came to the cliff in the lava source. Holding out a backpack with moss, the guy said that he brought everything. Steve took the bag and asked to wait a second. Tired, Ian sat down by the column, thinking that if he gave another quest for gathering, he would simply abandon this quest line. He had to gather herbs 5 times in a row. Clasping his hands in a lock, he thought that it didn't matter if there were more quests, he just asked that they not be about gathering. A lava explosion occurred in front of the guy. Ian looked ahead anxiously and thought that he would really be the first player in Kylan who died from a dungeon explosion. A lot of lava flowed down the walls. The protagonist looked at the lava fall and thought that it stopped shaking. Was it really over? He looked down from the cliff and thought that the color had changed. A bright explosion occurred. Steve rose from the ground and shouted that the lava source was finally cleared. His eyes were shining and he was saying that it was all thanks to his hard work that he finally found peace. Ian smirked and said that of course he was very happy to hear that, but he should give him a reward quickly, something really cool and useful. The guard replied that he tried hard, it was not much, but let this be his reward. Putting his hand to his chin, the guy thought that if he had been doing hunting on top of all this, he would probably be a level higher, and he was a little disappointed. He looked at the notification that he had received the lava binding stone. Steve was holding the staff and telling him that the stone contained one of the guardians that protect the lava core. He was thinking of giving him someone else, but since he worked so hard, he would give him his favorite. The protagonist clicked on the screen and thought about the guardian. A window appeared with information about the taming of the king of lava dragons. Ian gritted his teeth in shock and realized that this was a heroic type monster. He looked at the stats and said that his attack stat was almost 2000, and he had a breathing ability and an area attack passive skill called Lava Lore. His power was limited by the fact that he couldn't evolve, but it was the best pet he could ask for to level up. It was incredible. The protagonist tapped the screen, saying that he would gladly make a contract to make him his pet right now, but he didn't have enough leadership, so he had to go to town and buy some leadership boosting item. If that didn't work, he would have to destroy the contract with Cloffy. Ian stood in front of Steve and thanked him, adding that he would be happy to use the dragon. The guy came up to the door with a smile and said that he had to go now. The guard dissolved and said goodbye to him. The protagonist happily imagined the dragon. We see a school from which a voice was heard saying that the call could not be made. It was necessary to leave a message after the signal. Barry was furiously holding the phone and saying that for some reason his friend was not picking up. He should come to school. Today was the beginning of the semester. Putting his hand to his lips, he suggested that perhaps he fell asleep in the game capsule. This morning he checked. 50 hours had passed since he logged in. The guy took the backpack from the table and asked how long he had been grinding, because if he did not answer after the lecture, it would be better to go check what happened to him. Barry walked along the corridor and asked what level he was now. The plot moves us to the snowy mountains. Ian glanced at Ben on his shoulder. The protagonist was sitting on a red dragon. Gargoyles were flying in the clouds. Biggie furiously extended his fist. The guy was flying on a dragon towards a bottomless abyss. He looked to the side and called his pet. The dragon released a huge flame. The monsters were burning in the lava. The protagonist looked at Lou and shouted at him to catch up with the one running away. The gargoyle dodged the wolf in flight. The monsters were hovering in the sky. Ian jumped off the rake and ordered to catch them. The surprised gargoyles were flying. The dragon swung its paw furiously. It threw the monsters aside. The protagonist happily looked at the screen and said that he finally reached level 90. He clenched his fists with a smile and said that he could now get a unique class skill. Ian clasped his hands with tears and asked God for it to be a skill that would help him level up. The guy remembered how he had been talking on the phone with displeasure and decided that he needed to have time to get to level 93. Introducing the professor in the chair, he said that today was the beginning of the semester, but for now there was a transition period, and the day of the beginning of specialized classes would be soon. The protagonist looked at his hands in panic and said that he had less than 10 days left. Ian sat among the pets, upset, and said that he did not even have time to sleep. He was very tired. Pressing the screen, the guy said that he really wanted to be given something that would greatly help with leveling up. He would not even ask for anything like explosive potential. The protagonist pressed seriously and mentally begged. Notifications popped up that he had received the skills assimilation and link. Putting his hand to his chin, the guy asked what it was. A window appeared with information about the link. Ian looked thoughtfully at the screen and said that it was not bad. He had seen a similar skill on the forums about the Dark Sorcerer class. Frowning, the guy asked what it meant the health of 2 linked targets will be averaged. Looking at the pets with their health, he called the link. The protagonist watched as the wolf and Biggie exchanged some health. Looking at the companions, he said that it turned out to be true. They equalized the amount of health in percentages, regardless of its amount in units. Closing his eyes, the protagonist said that this could be useful in some cases, but it was a double-edged sword, so it should be used with caution. He put his fist to his lips and asked what kind of skill assimilation was. A window with information about the skill appeared. Ian thoughtfully looked down and said that it looked like his stats would equal the pets. It was interesting. Tapping the screen, he said that they should try. The protagonist looked at Ben and said that his stats were the most disproportionate, so it would be best to test it on him. He picked up the pet in his hands and said that they should try the new skill. Smiling, the guy activated assimilation. The protagonist anxiously clenched his teeth. There was a flash in the middle of the mountains. Ian looked at his hands warily and said that outwardly nothing had changed, but what about his stats? Looking at the screen, he said that he had 1,500 defense, attack and agility almost at 0, but almost at the level of Biggie. Ben suddenly laughed. The protagonist looked away and asked what was going on. The guy looked at the screen with displeasure. He looked at the icon of himself in Ben's body and said that he looked like this now. Ian pressed the screen in confusion and said that he wanted to deactivate and return to an attractive appearance. Sighing, the protagonist decided that he would need to use this skill on Ben less often. The guy grabbed his elbows and said that thank God, today he will already get the required level. He is falling off his feet from fatigue, a short break, and continue grinding. The plot moves us to a Korean university, which was illuminated by the sun. Barry approached the stairs and said that he did not even read his messages. The girl came up to him and called him by name. Rena smiled sweetly and asked if it was really him. The guy looked at the happy girl and wondered if she was from his course, maybe studying theater, and she was a rising star. Barry smiled shyly and asked if it was Rena. Looking at the shy girl, he thought about how he knew that Ian was an eccentric. He made himself a character that looks exactly like him in real life. Rena closed her fingers and asked if he knew where the main character was, to which he replied that he did not come to the university. Closing her eyes, the girl said that he was probably sitting at home and playing now because it was a transitional period. Barry stood in front of the girl upset and thought that Ian would be reprimanded at the university. Meanwhile, the guy stood in the mountains and cast a spell of dark justice. He dealt a powerful attack on the monster. The skeletons in armor ran at the troll. Michael stood among the warriors and ordered them to move forward. Putting his hand to his face, the boy said that he would soon level up. He was already level 85, so this stupid summoner was probably already level 80 by now. He clenched his fists in tears and said that he was infuriated by that cowardly fool Ian, even when he just thought about him and that ridiculous turtle with a huge head. Putting his hand under his robe, the boy said that he was a shameful summoner, so he must have already reached level 85 by some dishonest means. Michael looked at the doll in the form of the protagonist. He raised his hand with a smile and said that he would get what he deserved. Extending his hand with energy, the boy used the curse of the undead. He stood silently with his hand extended. The system reported that this was an unsuitable target. The skill could not be used. Michael sadly bowed his head. Covering his eye with his hand, he said that he needed to become stronger to defeat this coward, if only he had not been caught up in the weekend. The boy stood behind the skeletons with a smile and thought that he should do better. Michael sat on his knees in the school in tears and thought about being punished for not doing his homework assigned during the holidays. He needed to prove that it was worth it. We see the school building where roll call was taking place. The sun's rays illuminated the windows. The teacher stood in the classroom and asked if Ian was there. Dave imagined the protagonist and thought about this bastard not showing up for the first week of classes. Frowning, he thought about the first week being a transition period, so it wouldn't affect his grades even if he didn't show up. However, his main classes were the same, so usually everyone attended. Barry sat tensely at his desk and thought about what was going on with the professor. He turned around and wondered why Ian hadn't shown up yet, because it was a very important week. Dave stood by the board and asked if the protagonist was there. He exhaled and said that in that case it was time to begin. There was a noise from behind the door. Jan leaned into the doorway and said that he was here. The protagonist winked and told the professor that he had arrived. The protagonist stood to the side of the man who said that it was great, adding that he could sit down. Ian walked up to his comrades when he exclaimed that he made it just in time. Barry looked away with displeasure and asked the guy where he disappeared to, adding that he didn't even answer his calls. The protagonist looked tired when he answered that he had reasons. He held the phone in front of him when he said that it was all for this. Barry looked seriously in front of him. The display showed a character when he asked about Ian really reaching level 93. The other students looked at them with displeasure and asked them to be quiet, then they apologized. Other guys were sitting behind the guys when Barry said that he was crazy because it had only been a little while since his reset and he had already reached level 93. Then the protagonist cursed and answered that he was really good. Ian smiled slightly and asked his friend to admit that he was jealous. The guy's face was sweating as he answered yes and then asked him what he was going to do next. The dark-haired guy was holding the phone in front of him as he exclaimed that it was great and that everything was ready. The display showed a notification that a message had been sent to Professor Dave. Ian's friend opened his mouth wide and asked him why he had sent this to the professor, to which the guy replied that he wouldn't know. The man looked away. There was a phone lying next to his hand. Dave chuckled, looking ahead. The protagonist's mouth fell open. He was holding the phone in front of him when the message came. The display said that he needed to go to the professor's office after class. The next notification said that he was already late. Ian brought his hand to his face and asked what it meant. There was no one in the hallway. The guy was sitting in front of the professor. The protagonist looked away worriedly and asked what he wanted to ask. Dave frowned and said that they would first talk about what his picture meant. Ian placed his hands on his lap. He brought his hand to his face and explained that it was his character's status window in Killen, adding that he was sure he would understand since the professor was also playing the game and that he was level 93. The man looked away thoughtfully as the boy wondered what kind of reaction that was. The protagonist's eyes sparkled as he asked if Dave had forgotten about their bet, adding that he had reached the level they had agreed upon. He sat in front of the professor, who replied that he had assumed they had agreed that the boy would reach that level before the semester began, and then asked if his memory was failing him, adding that that was why he had said Ian was late. They were sitting across from each other when the main character said that the thing was that he actually reached level 93 before the semester started, but since he had been playing for over 50 hours, he had slept until yesterday because he needed to rest for today's classes. Ian spread his arms wide when the man asked if the guy really thought he would believe that, adding that he wouldn't fool a child with that, and the man replied that it was true and that he swears on God and asks him to believe him. The professor was sitting in front of him when he thought about how they hadn't signed a contract, so if the man refused, there was nothing he could do. Dave pictured the hooded character, thinking about how he couldn't believe that the guy actually reached level 93 as a summoner, and how didn't the official stream say that the highest leveled summoner only reached level 78. Ian curled his lips, saying that he needed to convince him, while the professor thought that although he was late, it was still quite impressive. The protagonist folded his arms in front of him, when Dave realized that if this guy was not lying, he could use him to collect data. The man looked forward and asked about his plans for Sunday. The guy and the wolf appeared on the burning plateau when he exclaimed that he was finally free. Ian imagined the face of the professor, who asked him why he was so surprised, and then added that they would meet in Kylan, and that he needed to come to the city of Lobos at 2 o'clock on Sunday. Then the guy said that he was going to convince him. The wolf stood behind him when he asked why he suggested meeting on Sunday, assuming that Dave thought he faked the picture. The protagonist smiled and said that he was having a much easier time anyway, now that he didn't have to level up, and that he needed to finish the quests he had put off, and then wondered where to start. He imagined a tower behind him as he said that the quests he needed to do at SOP were the Dimensional Magic Tower and hatching the Griffin Egg, and that he didn't have enough information about the second quest right now, so he would do the first one. There was a ravine in front of them as he suggested to lie that they head to the Dimensional Magic Tower. There was a shining crystal at the top of the tower as Ian said that it was his first time there. He paused at the entrance as he added that it felt empty, and that he didn't think that was why players came there. The protagonist's mouth dropped open, looking ahead. A portal opened in front of him. A system notification appeared, asking if he wanted to enter the upper levels of the Dimensional Magic Tower. The guy began to disappear into the portal as he answered yes. He looked ahead confidently and asked what it was. A white road appeared in front of him as he assumed that there was another portal at the end. Ian took a step and wondered if he should just go straight ahead, then added that it was too easy. A bright flash appeared in front of him, then he asked what it was. There were huge trolls in front of him as he wondered why they appeared there. The monster's eyes were glowing as the boy asked what those barriers were. There was a portal behind the trolls as Ian assumed that he needed to defeat the monsters that appeared on each floor, adding that it was more difficult. The monsters looked ahead, growling loudly. The protagonist looked away, thinking that this was very presumptuous. A golem appeared behind the boy as he called everyone. He looked ahead confidently and ordered them to defeat the monsters. The wolf and the golem rushed towards the trolls. The monster opened its mouth and roared. The bark bared its sharp fangs and growled. The monsters headed towards the wolf and the golem. He clenched his fist, opening his mouth.